If we don't sign this, we won't get married, my wife said as she forced me to sign a prenup to protect her assets. Years later, I won a $15 million lottery, and she demanded half, not knowing the contract she worshipped would turn against her. The restaurant was one of those places where the silverware costs more than most people's monthly groceries. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light on tables covered with cream-colored linen tablecloths. And somewhere in the background, a pianist was playing something French and melancholic. I remember thinking how the music matched the tension that sat between us like an unwanted guest. Vanessa sat across from me, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the leather portfolio that held our future, or at least her version of it. She was wearing that Chanel suit, the navy blue one with gold buttons she'd bought specifically for important meetings. This was an important meeting. This was the meeting where she'd tell me in no uncertain terms that our love story came with terms and conditions. Marcus, she began, and I could already hear the lawyer tone creeping into her voice. She did that when she wanted to create distance, when she needed me to understand that this was business, not romance. I need you to understand where I'm coming from. I nodded, taking a sip of the wine I couldn't really afford. We were supposed to be celebrating our engagement. The ring on her finger, a 2-carat princess-cut diamond that had cost me 3 months' salary, caught the light as she opened the portfolio. Inside was a professionally bound document easily 40 pages thick. My family has worked very hard to build what we have, she continued. Her eyes, those green eyes I'd gotten lost in 2 years ago at a fundraiser I'd snuck into with a college buddy, were serious. No, not serious, wary. My father built his company from nothing. My mother's investments have secured our family's future for generations. And she paused, her hand moving to rest on the document. I have my own career, my own trajectory. I know, I said, because it was true. Vanessa Harwell was a junior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms at just 32 years old. She drove a Mercedes her father had bought her for making partner. She owned a downtown condo most people could only dream of renting. Her family's wealth was the kind that came with a pedigree, with old money roots that sank deep into the city's foundations. I, on the other hand, was a high school history teacher who coached the basketball team as a side gig. My apartment was a studio above a Thai restaurant. My car was a 15-year-old Honda Civic that made worrying noises when it rained. I came from a good family. My parents were loving, hardworking people who'd given me everything they could. But everything they could meant a state college education, not a trust fund. The prenup, she said, sliding the document toward me, protects us both. I almost laughed. Protects us both. As if I had anything to protect. As if my teacher's pension and my collection of vintage basketball cards were somehow equivalent to her family's real estate empire and their stock portfolio. Walk me through it, I said instead, pulling the document closer. She did, methodically, her lawyer voice in full effect. The prenup was comprehensive, she explained, exhaustive. It even detailed every possible scenario for the end of our marriage. Death, divorce, infidelity, abandonment. Each section was numbered, subsectioned, cross-referenced. It was less a prenup and more a constitutional document for the state of our marital nation. The key points are simple, she said, though nothing about the document was simple. Everything she owned before the marriage would remain hers. Everything she acquired during the marriage, through inheritance, her career, investments made with her family's guidance, would remain hers. Everything I owned before the marriage would remain mine. Everything I acquired during the marriage, through my own efforts, would remain mine. Separate property, she said, using her index finger to trace a column of text. Clearly defined, no commingling of assets, clear boundaries. And joint expenses? I asked. Rent, utilities, groceries. We split them proportionally to our incomes, she said without hesitation. She'd thought of everything. I make about 4 times what you do, so I pay 80%. You pay 20%. Fair and equitable. I nodded slowly, flipping through the pages. The document smelled like a law office, new paper and expensive printer toner, and the faint chemical scent of binding glue. Each page was dense with text, with clauses and subclauses, with whereas and herebys and the party of the first part. Section 7, she said, skipping ahead several pages. This is the heart of it. I read the section header, Future Assets and Acquired Wealth. This clause, Vanessa said, her voice taking on a tone of particular pride, was drafted specifically by me and my attorney. It's ironclad. She leaned forward, her finger pointing to paragraph 7.3. It states that any asset, income, prize, award, gift, or wealth of any kind acquired by either party during the marriage shall remain the sole and separate property of the acquiring party, without claim or right of division by the non-acquiring party. I read it 3 times. The language was clear, almost brutally so. If she made senior partner, her pay raise was hers. If I somehow wrote a best-selling book, the royalties were mine. If her grandmother left her a villa in Tuscany, I had no claim to it. If I won the lottery, in fact, I smiled at the thought, as if that were possible. Future assets, she repeated. Whatever we build separately. No one can ever claim they're entitled to the other person's success. So if you make senior partner and start earning millions, I said slowly, I can't touch it. Exactly. She smiled, relieved that I was getting it. And if I somehow get rich, I continued, you can't touch it. Precisely. Her smile widened. It protects your autonomy as much as mine, Marcus. Neither of us becomes dependent on the other. Neither of us can be accused of being the gold digger or the leech. We stay together because we love each other, not because we're financially entangled. I leaned back, the document still open in front of me. The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversation, with the clinking of expensive china and crystal. At the next table, a man was proposing, getting down on one knee as his girlfriend cried happy tears. Their love story was being written in real time, without the complication of lawyers and clauses. Vanessa, I said, and my voice came out lower than I'd intended. Do you think I'm marrying you for your money? Her face softened slightly. No, she said. No, Marcus, I don't. But I've seen what happens when marriages end. I've litigated these cases. I've seen people who loved each other tear each other apart over money. I've seen prenups that weren't clear enough lead to years of litigation. She reached across the table and took my hand. This isn't about not trusting you. It's about protecting us both from the worst-case scenario. And if we don't sign this, her hand withdrew. The softness vanished from her face. Then we don't get married. There it was, the ultimatum, delivered in a 5-star restaurant over wine I couldn't afford and a meal I wouldn't be able to finish because my appetite had suddenly disappeared. Sign the agreement or lose her, accept her terms or watch her walk away. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her beauty was the kind that intimidated people. Sharp cheekbones, perfect posture, and an aura of untouchability. But I'd seen her other side, the side she showed me in private. I'd seen her laugh so hard at my bad jokes that wine came out of her nose. I'd held her while she cried over a case she'd lost, over a client she couldn't save. I'd seen her fall asleep reading case law, her reading glasses askew on her face, her guard completely down. I loved her. God help me, I loved her. Do you have a pen? I asked. She blinked, surprised. You're just going to sign it? You don't want to have your own lawyer look it over? I don't have my own lawyer, I said. I have a teacher's salary and student loans. I trust you, Vanessa. I'm not marrying you for your money. I'm marrying you because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. If you need this prenup to feel secure, then I'll sign it. No hesitation, no resentment. And I meant it. In that moment, sitting in that overpriced restaurant with her prenup in front of me, I genuinely meant it. What did I care about her family's money? I'd never had money. I'd never expected to have money. Money was an abstract to me, something other people had that I occasionally borrowed. She pulled out a pen, a Mont Blanc, naturally, and handed it to me. Her hand was trembling slightly. I turned to the final pages where neat little tabs marked Party A, Vanessa Louise Harwell, and Party B, Marcus James Reed. I initialed every page, all 47 of them. I read the acknowledgement that stated I understood I was waiving potential rights to marital property. I read the declaration that I was signing voluntarily, without duress. I signed my name 3 times. Each signature witnessed by the notary's statement Vanessa had already prepared. There, I said, handing the document back to her. Done. She looked at my signatures, then looked up at me. There were tears in her eyes, though I couldn't tell if they were from relief or something else. I love you, she said. I love you too. The pianist had moved on to something more upbeat, something that sounded like a celebration. The couple at the next table were kissing, the new ring catching the light on her finger. Our waiter approached with dessert menus, oblivious to the contract that now lay between us like a border wall. We ordered the chocolate souffle to share, and Vanessa put the prenup back in her portfolio. We talked about the wedding, about the venue she'd already booked, about the guest list that was mostly her family and colleagues, about the honeymoon in Bali that her parents were paying for. We talked about our future apartment that we'd move into after the wedding in her building, where I'd finally have more than 400 square feet to call home. I didn't think about the prenup again that night. I didn't think about Section 7 or future assets or the way she'd said without claim or right of division, as if it were poetry. I thought about how happy she looked, how relieved, how the tension had left her shoulders once I'd signed away my hypothetical rights to her hypothetical future wealth. I thought about how love was supposed to be enough. I thought about how sometimes love requires sacrifice. I thought about how I'd just signed the most important document of my life without reading it carefully, without fully understanding it, without imagining any scenario where it would actually matter. For years later, I'd think about that night very differently. For years later, I'd pull out my copy of that prenup, the one Vanessa had insisted I keep, professional as always, and I'd read Section 7.3 all over again. For years later, I'd understand that Vanessa had been right about one thing. The prenup did protect us both, just not in the way she'd imagined. The wedding was everything Vanessa had ever dreamed of and nothing I'd ever pictured for myself. It took place at the Rosewood Estate, a sprawling property on the outskirts of the city that belonged to her family's country club. The venue cost more than my annual salary. I knew this because I accidentally saw the invoice when it arrived at our apartment. Vanessa had laughed when she'd caught me staring at the number. She kissed my cheek and reminded me that her parents were taking care of everything. "This is their gift to us," she'd said. "Let them celebrate the way they want to." So I let them. 300 guests filled white chairs arranged in perfect rows on the manicured lawn. A string quartet played Pachelbel's Canon as Vanessa walked down the aisle on her father's arm, looking like something out of a bridal magazine in a custom Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than my car. Her veil was antique lace that had belonged to her grandmother. Her shoes were Jimmy Choo. Even her something blue was a sapphire bracelet that matched her engagement ring. I stood at the altar in a Tom Ford tuxedo that Vanessa had insisted on buying for me. "You can't rent a tux for our wedding, Marcus," she'd said when I suggested it. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event." So she'd taken me for a private fitting, and now I was wearing a tux that fit so perfectly it felt like a costume, like I was playing the part of someone who belonged in her world. My family sat in the third row. My parents, my sister, my grandmother who'd flown in from Arizona. They looked uncomfortable in their formal wear, out of place among the Harwells and their circle of corporate executives and old money families. My mother had cried when she saw the venue, but I couldn't tell if the tears were from happiness or being overwhelmed. My father had clapped me on the shoulder that morning and said, "Are you sure about this, son?" with a look that suggested he hoped I'd say no. Of course I'd said yes, because when Vanessa reached the altar and lifted her veil, when she looked at me with those green eyes shining with tears, when she took my hands and whispered, "Hi," with that little private smile that was just for me, I was sure. I was absolutely sure. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. Mine were simple, honest, probably too plain for the setting. I promised to support her dreams, to laugh with her, to be her partner in everything. I promised to love her when it was easy and when it was hard, when we had everything and when we had nothing. Her vows were more eloquent, more carefully crafted. She promised to challenge me, to grow with me, to build a life of mutual respect and independence. She promised to honor the man I was and the man I would become. Not once did she mention the word obey or serve. Vanessa didn't believe in those words. She believed in partnership, in equality, in two successful people choosing to share their lives while maintaining their individual identities. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. I kissed her as 300 people applauded. The string quartet launched into something triumphant and joyful. We walked back down the aisle together, her hand in mine, her smile radiant. The reception was a whirlwind of champagne, speeches, and a 7-course dinner with wine pairings I couldn't begin to appreciate. These were her dreams coming true. My job was to show up, smile, and not step on her expensive shoes. "Happy," I whispered as we swayed together, surrounded by guests watching our choreographed performance. "Completely," she whispered back, and she meant it. I could see it on her face, in the way she glowed with satisfaction. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as she'd planned it. The party lasted until midnight. We cut a 5-tiered cake that tasted like cardboard wrapped in fondant. We threw the bouquet and the garter. We posed for 1,000 photos that would later be compiled into a leather-bound album that lived on our living room coffee table. A monument to this perfect day. Finally, exhausted and a little drunk, we escaped to the bridal suite the venue provided. Vanessa's heels were the first thing to go, flying across the room with a sigh of relief. Then the veil, carefully placed on a hanger. Then the dress, which required my help with approximately 40 tiny buttons up the back. "We're married," she said, standing in her white lingerie, looking at the rings on her finger as if she couldn't quite believe it. "We're married," I confirmed, loosening my tie. Then she laughed, a genuine, unself-conscious laugh that had nothing to do with impressing guests or keeping up appearances. She jumped on the bed. This elegant, sophisticated woman literally jumped on the hotel bed like a child and pulled me down with her. That night, in that overpriced bridal suite, it was just us, just Marcus and Vanessa, just two people who loved each other. The pretentious wedding and the prenup forgotten for a few hours. The honeymoon in Bali was beautiful and weird. We stayed at a resort where our villa had a private pool and an ocean view. Vanessa had planned every detail, the spa treatments, the temple visits, the romantic dinners on the beach. She'd even scheduled our activities with military precision. Sunrise yoga at 6 a.m., breakfast at 8 a.m., beach time from 10 to 12, lunch at 1 p.m., afternoon excursion at 3 p.m., dinner at 7 p.m. I went along with the plan for the most part, but on the fourth day, I woke up early and slipped out of the villa while she was still sleeping. I walked down to the beach by myself, found a quiet spot away from the resort, and just sat there watching the waves. No schedule, no plans, just me and the ocean and the kind of peace that only comes when you have absolutely nothing to do. Vanessa found me an hour later, worried. "You missed yoga," she said, slightly out of breath from looking for me. I thought something had happened. "I just needed some quiet," I said. She sat down next to me on the sand, still in her silk pajamas, and we watched the waves together in silence. After a while, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I've been micromanaging everything, haven't I?" "A little," I admitted. "I just want everything to be perfect. I want us to have these amazing memories." "We will," I said. "But maybe some of the best memories come from not planning every second." She considered this, then nodded. "Okay, no more schedule for the rest of the trip. We'll be spontaneous." We weren't, not really. Spontaneity didn't come naturally to Vanessa, but we tried. We slept late. We ate at restaurants we stumbled upon by accident. We got lost exploring a local market and ended up having the best meal of the trip from a street vendor. We made love at random times of the day instead of in carefully planned evening sessions. We had a genuine, unscheduled adventure. When we got back home to our new apartment, well, her apartment that I'd moved into, real life was waiting with all its mundane details and complications. The apartment was a 2-bedroom on the 15th floor of a luxury high-rise downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. The kitchen had marble countertops and appliances I was afraid to touch. The bathroom had heated floors and a rain shower that felt like standing in a warm tropical storm. My entire old apartment could have fit inside the master bedroom. "Welcome home," Vanessa had said the first time she showed it to me before the wedding. Our home. But it never quite felt like our home. It felt like her home that I lived in. The furniture was all hers, chosen before I moved in. The art on the walls reflected her taste. The books on the shelves were her law books, her design magazines, her collection of literary fiction I'd never read. I brought my things, my clothes, my basketball trophies, my collection of history books, and I tried to find places for them that wouldn't disrupt her aesthetic. One day, about a month after we'd moved in together, she noticed me struggling. I was standing in the living room holding my framed poster of Michael Jordan's Last Shot, trying to figure out where to hang it in a space filled with abstract art and minimalist design. "You can put it wherever you want," she said from the kitchen where she was making her morning coffee. "It doesn't really fit," I said. "It's your home too." But we both knew it wasn't, not really. So the Jordan poster went into my office, the second bedroom Vanessa had designated as Marcus's space. It was a nice office. It had a desk, a bookshelf, and good light, but it was still just a room in her apartment, a space where my things could exist without disrupting the carefully curated life she'd built. The prenup's financial arrangement went into effect immediately. We split expenses proportionally, just as she'd outlined. She paid 80% of the rent, utilities, and groceries. I paid 20%. We kept separate bank accounts, filed our taxes separately. She had her credit cards, I had mine. She paid for her car, I paid for mine. When we went out to dinner, we'd either split the bill or take turns paying. Though her turns always seemed to involve nicer restaurants than mine. It was all very fair and equitable and modern. It was also profoundly lonely, because what I learned in those first few months of marriage was that financial independence taken to its extreme creates a kind of emotional distance. We were roommates who happened to be in love. We were business partners who occasionally had sex. We were two separate people living parallel lives under the same roof. Vanessa worked late, 12, 14-hour days at the firm. She'd come home exhausted, eat whatever I'd made for dinner or whatever she'd picked up on the way, and collapse on the couch with her laptop. I'd grade papers at the dining room table while she answered emails in the living room. We went to bed at different times, woke up at different times, kissed each other goodbye in the morning like business partners heading off to separate meetings. On weekends, she had lunches with her law school friends, networking events, her yoga class, her book club. I had basketball games to coach, papers to grade, my own friends from the teacher's lounge who couldn't afford the restaurants Vanessa's friends frequented. Sometimes our schedules would align and we'd have dinner together, watch a movie, pretend to be a normal couple, but mostly we were busy. Mostly we were building our separate lives according to Section 7.3 of our prenup. I didn't realize how lonely I was until my friend Derek pointed it out. We were at a bar near the school, having a couple of beers after a particularly brutal day of parent-teacher conferences. I was telling him about Vanessa's latest case, a corporate merger she was working on that had her pulling 80-hour weeks. "Man," Derek said, sipping his beer, "when do you actually see your wife?" I thought about it. Sundays, usually. Sometimes Saturday nights if she's not too tired. That's it. She's busy. She's building her career. And what are you building? The question caught me off guard. What was I building? I was teaching the same American history curriculum I'd taught for 5 years. I was coaching the same basketball team. I was living in the same city, driving the same car, making roughly the same salary with small annual increases that barely kept up with inflation. I wasn't building anything. I was maintaining. I was existing. I was being Marcus Reed, reliable husband, stable teacher, the man who'd signed away his hypothetical future in exchange for a woman who was too busy to notice most days. "It's fine," I told Derek, though I didn't believe it myself. "It's just a busy season for her. It'll get better." But it didn't get better. If anything, it got worse. Vanessa was promoted to senior associate, which came with more responsibility, more hours, more stress. She started traveling for depositions, client meetings, conferences. She'd be gone for days at a time. She'd call me from hotel rooms in other cities, exhausted, asking about my day while clearly thinking about her case files. And I'd tell her about the Civil War essay one of my students had written or how the basketball team had finally won a game. And I'd hear the distraction in her voice, the part of her brain that was still working even as she tried to be present for me. "I miss you," I said once during one of these calls. "I miss you too," she said automatically. Then, after a pause, "This case is almost done. Another week, maybe 2, and things will calm down." They never calmed down. There was always another case, another client, another crisis that required her undivided attention. The second year of our marriage looked a lot like the first, except we argued more. Little fights about stupid things. Whose turn was it to get groceries? Why hadn't I emptied the dishwasher? Why did she keep rescheduling our dinner dates? Bigger fights about real things. How we never saw each other. How I felt like I was living alone. How she felt I didn't appreciate the sacrifices she was making for her career. "You knew what you were getting into," she'd said during one particularly heated argument. "You knew I was ambitious. You knew my career was important to me." "I didn't know I was marrying a ghost," I'd retorted. She'd gone to her office after that, even though it was 11 at night. She'd slept on her office couch and come home the next morning with apology flowers and a promise to do better. We were always promising to do better. We never did better. The third year was when I started to wonder if we'd made a mistake. Not in getting married. I still loved her, even when I barely saw her, but in how we'd structured our marriage. The prenup that was supposed to protect us had actually isolated us. We were so busy maintaining our financial independence, our separate successes, our individual identities, that we'd forgotten to build anything together. We had no shared dreams, no shared goals, no shared anything except an address and a marriage certificate. But I didn't say anything. I just kept teaching, coaching, existing in her orbit, waiting for the day things would magically get better. The fourth year started like all the others, with Vanessa buried in work and me buried in the quiet disappointment of a marriage that looked perfect on paper but felt hollow in practice. The fourth year was when everything changed. The fourth year was when I bought the lottery ticket. I bought the lottery ticket on a Tuesday. There was nothing special about that Tuesday. It was February, the dead of winter, when the city looked gray and tired and everyone walked around hunched against the cold. I just finished teaching 3 classes back to back. First period freshmen who couldn't stay awake. Third period juniors who wouldn't stop talking, and fifth period seniors who were already mentally checked out, counting the days until graduation. My car wouldn't start in the school parking lot. Again. The Civic had been making those worrying noises for months, but I'd been putting off taking it to a mechanic because I knew what they'd tell me, that the car was 15 years old and dying and that I should just replace it. But replacing it would mean dipping into my savings, the modest account I'd been building since before the marriage, and I was weirdly protective of that money. It was mine, the prenup said so. So everything I earned was mine, and spending it on a new car felt like admitting defeat somehow. So instead I sat in the cold car, turning the key over and over, listening to the engine sputter and fail. Other teachers walked past me, waving sympathetically. Derek stopped and offered me a jump, but we both knew that wasn't going to fix whatever was wrong this time. Finally, after 20 minutes, and with my phone battery nearly dead, the engine caught. The Civic sputtered to life, shaking as if it were doing me a personal favor, coughing smoke from its tailpipe into the cold air. I drove home slowly, babying the accelerator, praying I'd make it the 8 miles to the apartment without breaking down on the freeway. I made it, just barely, parked in the garage of Vanessa's building, our building. I reminded myself, though I still thought of it as hers, and sat there for a moment, exhausted. Not physically exhausted, though teaching was always tiring. Emotionally exhausted, spiritually exhausted, exhausted from maintaining the fiction that everything was fine. The apartment was empty when I went upstairs. Vanessa had texted earlier saying she'd be working late again. Some merger, some client emergency, some reason she wouldn't be home until after 10. There was money on the counter. She'd left me a $100 bill with a note for dinner and groceries. Sorry about tonight. Love you. I stared at the money for a long time. $100. More than enough for a nice dinner. Enough for a week's worth of groceries if I shopped carefully. She'd left it casually, the way you'd leave a tip for good service. She probably hadn't even thought twice about it. To Vanessa, $100 was nothing, barely worth registering in her budgeting app. To me, $100 was 2 days' pay after taxes. I took the money, folded it, put it in my wallet. Then I grabbed my coat and went back out. There was a convenience store 2 blocks from the apartment building, one of those 24-hour places that sold everything from cigarettes to cat food to lottery tickets. I'd walked past it hundreds of times, but rarely went in. Vanessa shopped at Whole Foods, ordered from fancy meal delivery services, treated the convenience store as if it were beneath her. But I went in that night, driven by some impulse I couldn't quite name. The fluorescent lights were too bright, buzzing with that electric sound convenience stores always have. A bored teenager stood behind the counter, staring at his phone. The aisles were narrow and overstocked. Every surface was trying to sell me something. I bought a frozen pizza for dinner, $6.99, because I was too tired to cook. I picked up a 6-pack of beer that was on sale, and then, standing at the counter while the teenager rang up my purchases with mechanical disinterest, I saw the lottery display. The jackpot was $15 million, the number displayed on a bright yellow sign behind the counter. Impossible to miss. $15 million. The kind of money that seemed fictional, that belonged in movies and other people's lives. One jackpot ticket, I heard myself say. The teenager looked up from his phone, slightly surprised that I'd spoken. Quick pick, or you got numbers? Quick pick. All right. He pushed a button. A machine behind him whirred and spat out a ticket. He handed it to me unceremoniously, as if he were giving me a gas receipt. That'll be $2, he said. I added it to my total. $24.37 for a frozen pizza, cheap beer, and a lottery ticket. The teenager took Vanessa's $100 bill, gave me $75.63 in change, and went back to his phone before I'd even left the counter. I walked home in the cold, carrying my plastic bag of groceries and my lottery ticket. I didn't think about winning. I didn't fantasize about what I'd do with $15 million. I didn't even really know why I'd bought the ticket. It was just something to do, a small act of rebellion against my carefully controlled life. The apartment was still empty when I got back. I heated up the frozen pizza, drank 2 of the beers, and graded papers while I watched a documentary about World War II that I'd already seen 3 times. The lottery ticket sat on the counter where I'd left it. Just another piece of paper in a pile of bills and takeout menus. Vanessa came home at 11:30, looking worn out. Her suit was rumpled. Her hair was falling out of its professional bun. She'd probably been beautiful when she left for work that morning, but now she just looked tired. "Hey," she said, dropping her briefcase by the door with a thud. "Sorry I'm so late." "It's fine," I said, because what else was I going to say? She saw the pizza box on the counter, the empty beer bottles by the sink. "Did you eat?" "Yeah, I saved you some pizza if you want." "I ate at the office." She kicked off her heels, leaving them in the middle of the hallway where I'd trip on them later. "I'm just going to shower and go to bed. It's going to be another long day tomorrow." "Okay." She paused. She seemed to notice something in my voice. "Are you mad?" "You don't sound mad." "I'm not mad, Vanessa. I'm just tired." She studied me for a moment, like I was a witness she was trying to read. Then she nodded. "Okay. Well, good night." "Good night." She disappeared into the bedroom. I heard the shower start. I heard her moving around, getting ready for bed. I stayed on the couch, drinking my 3rd beer, trying to remember the last time we'd had a real conversation that wasn't about logistics and schedules. The lottery ticket was still on the counter. I picked it up. I looked at the numbers the machine had chosen for me. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, with a Powerball of 9. Random numbers, meaningless numbers. Numbers that would never win anything. I folded the ticket and put it in my wallet, behind my driver's license where I wouldn't lose it. Not because I thought I'd win, just because I'd paid for it. And throwing it away felt wasteful. I forgot about the ticket almost immediately. Life went on in its familiar patterns. Teaching, grading, coaching. Vanessa working late, coming home exhausted, disappearing into her office or her laptop. Us coexisting in the same space, but rarely connecting. The marriage humming along on autopilot, comfortable and suffocating in equal measure. "She's working," I said, which wasn't technically true, but it felt true enough. We played cards, told the same stories we always told, complained about the same students and parents and administrators. It was comfortable, familiar, the kind of friendship that didn't require effort. These guys had known me since before Vanessa, when I was just Marcus Reed, who drove a beater and lived in a studio above a Thai restaurant. Around midnight, someone turned on the TV to check a sports score. The lottery drawing was on. A perky host pulling numbered balls out of a machine while pretending this wasn't just a tax on people who were bad at math. "Anybody buy a ticket?" Derek asked, not really paying attention. "I did, actually," I said, remembering. I pulled out my wallet, found the ticket still folded behind my license. "Oh, I gotta see this," said one of the other guys, Tom, who taught English, with a laugh. Marcus Reed, degenerate gambler. We all watched as the host called out the numbers. I smoothed my ticket out on Derek's coffee table. I checked the first number. 7. "Hey, you got one," Derek said, now mildly interested. Second number, 14. 2 numbers. "Look at you." Third number, 23. The room got quieter. Someone turned up the volume on the TV. Fourth number, 31. "Holy crap," Tom said. Fifth number, 42. Nobody was breathing. All 5 of us were staring at my lottery ticket, at the TV, at the impossibility unfolding in Derek's living room. The host picked up the final ball, the Powerball. She smiled her professional smile and held it up to the camera. "And the Powerball is 9. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The TV host was saying something about checking your tickets, about claim procedures, about how this was life-changing money, but I couldn't hear her over the ringing in my ears, over the pounding of my own heart. Derek started. "I think I did," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. "Check it again," Tom said. "Check all the numbers again." I checked. We all checked. We compared my ticket to the numbers on the screen over and over. Certain we'd made a mistake. Certain this wasn't real. But it was real. All 6 numbers matched perfectly. I'd won $15 million. Someone was yelling with joy. I think it was Derek. Someone else was laughing hysterically. Tom was already pulling up his phone, looking up lottery claim procedures. The poker game was forgotten. Cards and chips scattered across the table. I was just sitting there, holding the ticket, trying to process what had just happened. $15 million. Life-changing money. Life-altering money. Money that made my teacher's salary look like pocket change. Money that made Vanessa's 6-figure income look modest. Money that meant I'd never have to worry about my car breaking down again. I'd never have to budget for groceries again. I'd never have to feel like the poor husband in my own marriage again. You have to sign the back of the ticket, Tom was saying, reading from his phone. Right now, sign it before you do anything else. Derek handed me a pen. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely write my name. Marcus James Reed. My name, my ticket, my winnings. Do you know what this means? Derek said, grinning so wide his face looked like it was going to split. You're rich, man. You're really rich. I laughed, though it came out strange and choked. Yeah, I guess I am. What are you going to do with it? I don't know. I can't even. You gotta tell Vanessa, Tom said. Dude, your wife is going to flip out. Vanessa. The thought of her cut through the surreal fog that had settled over my brain. I needed to tell Vanessa. I needed to tell my wife that I'd just won $15 million, that our lives had just completely changed, that we'd never have to worry about money again. I pulled out my phone. It was after midnight, but Vanessa's event would be over. She'd probably be home, maybe already asleep. I called her. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice sleepy and confused. Marcus, what's wrong? It's late. Nothing's wrong, I said, and I was grinning like an idiot, like a kid on Christmas morning. Everything's, Vanessa, you're not going to believe this. What? You're scaring me. I won the lottery. Silence on the other end. Then what? The lottery. The $15 million jackpot. I bought a ticket on Tuesday, and I won. All 6 numbers. $15 million. More silence. I could hear her sitting up in bed. I could picture her face as she processed what I was saying. Are you serious? She said finally. Completely serious. I'm at Derek's. We just watched the drawing. I have the ticket right here. Vanessa, I won. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a gasp. Oh my God, Marcus. Oh my God. I know. We have to. She was stammering, something I'd never heard her do. Vanessa, who argued cases in front of judges, who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, was speechless. We have to get a lawyer and an accountant. And God, Marcus, do you know what this means? I thought I did. I thought this meant we'd won, that we'd finally caught a break, that the financial stress and the inequality and the awkwardness of our prenup would all just disappear. I thought this meant everything was about to get better. Come home, Vanessa was saying. Come home right now. We have to talk about this. We have to make plans. Okay, I said. I'm coming home. I said a quick goodbye to the guys. Promised to keep them updated. Accepted their congratulations and their disbelieving laughter. Derek hugged me, actually hugged me, and said, your life just changed, brother. He had no idea how right he was. I drove home carefully, paranoid about getting in an accident, about losing the ticket, about this all being some elaborate dream. The streets were empty, the city quiet. Every red light seemed to take an eternity. My hands were still shaking. The apartment was lit up with every light on when I arrived. Vanessa was awake, wide awake, wearing one of my old t-shirts and pacing the living room like a caged animal. She grabbed me the moment I walked in, kissed me hard, then pulled back to look at me. Show me the ticket, she said. I pulled it out of my wallet. She took it with careful hands. She studied it like it was a piece of evidence in a trial, checking each number against her phone where she'd looked up the winning combination. It's real, she whispered. Marcus, this is real. I know. She looked up at me, and her eyes were shining with something I hadn't seen in years. Excitement, joy, something that looked almost like love. We won, she said. We. That word hung in the air between us, suddenly heavy with implication. Actually, I said slowly, I won. Her expression faltered. Just for a second. What? The ticket's mine. I bought it with my money. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Obviously, but we're married, so we won, right? And there it was, the question that would unravel everything. Vanessa was still holding the lottery ticket, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the edges as if it might fly away. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the air charged with something I couldn't quite name. She was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between excitement and calculation. "We," she repeated. "We won." I should have said yes. I should have agreed immediately, pulled her into the celebration, popped champagne, started making plans for our suddenly golden future. That's what a good husband would have done. That's what the Marcus from 4 years ago, the one who signed her prenup without hesitation, would have done. But I didn't say yes. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, got one of the beers I'd bought on Tuesday, opened it, and took a long drink. Vanessa followed me, still holding the ticket, still waiting for my answer. "Marcus," she said, and her voice had shifted to something more careful, more controlled. Her lawyer voice. "We need to discuss this rationally." "Okay," I said. "Let's discuss it rationally." She put the ticket down on the kitchen counter, smoothed it out like she was preparing an exhibit for court. "You bought the lottery ticket during our marriage. That makes it marital property. Community property laws." "We don't have community property, normally," I interrupted. "We have a prenup. Remember?" Her jaw tightened slightly. "Of course I remember. But the prenup deals with protecting pre-existing assets and future assets," I said quietly. Section 7, Future Assets and Acquired Wealth. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa stared at me for a long moment. Then she laughed, but it sounded forced. "Marcus, come on. That section was to protect career earnings, inheritances, things like that. Not lottery winnings." "Actually," I said, and I was surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "That's not what it says. I remember because I read it very carefully before I signed it." This was a lie. I hadn't read it carefully at all, but I'd pulled out my copy of the prenup 6 months ago during one of our fights. I'd read it late one night while Vanessa was sleeping. I'd memorized certain sections in the quiet dark of our bedroom. "The language is very specific," I continued. "It says, and I quote, 'Any asset, income, prize, award, gift, or wealth of any kind acquired by either party during the marriage shall remain the sole and separate property of the acquiring party, without claim or right of division by the non-acquiring party.'" Vanessa's face had gone pale. "You memorized it." "Prize," I repeated. "It specifically says prize. You made sure to include that word. You wanted to be absolutely sure that anything either of us acquired during the marriage, by any means, would belong solely to whoever acquired it. That's not." She stopped herself. She ran a hand through her hair. "I didn't write that clause thinking about lottery tickets, Marcus. I was thinking about bonuses, stock options, inheritances." "But you didn't specify," I said. "You used broad language on purpose. Wealth of any kind. You wanted it to be comprehensive. You wanted to make sure that if you became incredibly successful, I'd have no claim on your success." I took another drink of my beer. "Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. The prenup is ironclad." She was breathing hard now, her chest rising and falling under my old t-shirt. "So what are you saying? That you're just going to keep all $15 million for yourself?" "I'm saying that according to the prenup you insisted on, the agreement you said was non-negotiable, the agreement that was a condition of our marriage, yes, the money is mine." "That's insane." "Why?" "Because now it's your money on the line instead of mine. This is different." "How?" I put my beer down. I leaned against the counter. "How is it different, Vanessa? Explain it to me." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Because we're married. Because marriage means sharing." "Why?" She stopped herself. She seemed to realize what she was saying. "Because marriage means sharing," I repeated softly. "That's interesting, because for 4 years you've made it very clear that our marriage specifically does not mean sharing. Separate accounts, separate property, proportional expenses, clear boundaries. Your words, not mine. You agreed to all of that." "I did. You're absolutely right. I agreed to every word of that prenup, just like you're going to have to agree to live by it now." Vanessa grabbed the copy of the prenup she kept in a kitchen drawer, because of course she kept a copy in the kitchen. She probably had copies stashed all over the apartment like a squirrel hoarding nuts. She flipped through it frantically, found Section 7, read it with a growing look of desperation. I watched her face change as she read. I saw the moment it dawned on her that I was right. The prenup she'd so carefully crafted, the document she'd been so proud of, the ironclad agreement that was supposed to protect her family's wealth, protected my lottery winnings with the same thoroughness. There has to be something, she muttered, flipping more pages. Some clause about good faith, or there isn't, I said. I already checked. I've had a lot of sleepless nights alone these past few months, plenty of time to read legal documents. She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, maybe, or panic. Marcus, please. You can't seriously be considering keeping all this money for yourself. That's not who you are. Who am I, Vanessa? You're a good person. You're generous. You're not. She struggled for the words. You're not cruel. Is it cruel to follow the rules you set? Is it cruel to punish me for being practical 4 years ago? Practical, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it now? She put the prenup down, came around the counter to stand in front of me. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more vulnerable. Honey, listen to me. I know things have been hard lately. I know I've been working too much. I know I haven't been the best wife. But this money, this could change everything for us. We could travel, buy a house, start a family. We could finally build the life we always talked about. We never talked about any of that, I said quietly. You talked about your career. I listened. That's not fair, isn't it? I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman I'd married. This stranger who shared my bed when she wasn't too tired. This person who'd been so careful to protect herself from me that she'd forgotten we were supposed to be on the same team. When was the last time we had a real conversation, Vanessa? When was the last time you asked about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time we did something together that wasn't on your schedule, planned by you, arranged around your needs? I've been busy. You've been busy for 4 years. And I've been patient for 4 years. I've lived in your apartment, followed your rules, respected your boundaries. I've been the supportive husband who doesn't complain when you work late, who doesn't make demands, who just quietly exists in the margins of your life. There were tears welling in her eyes now. Real tears, not the calculated kind she might use in a courtroom. So this is revenge. I work hard to build my career, and you're going to punish me by keeping $15 million. It's not revenge, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. I'm simply following the agreement we made. The one you insisted on, the one that was more important to you than my feelings when I said I didn't need it. She wiped at her eyes angrily. Fine. You want to talk about feelings? Let's talk about feelings. Do you have any idea how terrifying it was for me to marry you? This took me by surprise. What? Everyone, my parents, my colleagues, my friends, they all thought I was making a mistake. Marrying a teacher with no money, no connections, no prospects. They said you were probably with me for my money, that you tried to trap me, that I needed to protect myself. She was crying freely now, her voice breaking. And I defended you. I told them you weren't like that you loved me for me. But I was still scared, Marcus. I was terrified. So I wrote the prenup to protect myself. Yes, but also to protect us, to make sure money could never become an issue between us. And how'd that work out? I asked. She flinched. What? The prenup protected us. It made sure money never became an issue. I gestured around the apartment. Look at us, Vanessa. We don't have a marriage. We have a business arrangement. We're roommates with benefits. You've been so busy protecting yourself from me that you never actually let me in. That's not true. When's my birthday? She blinked. What? My birthday? When is it? She trailed off, her face paling. It's in the summer. June. July. August 15th. We've been married for 4 years, and you don't know when my birthday is. I'm bad with dates. You remember every client meeting, every court date, every deadline, but you can't remember your husband's birthday. I picked up my beer, found it empty. Do you know what I did for your birthday last year? I took a personal day from work. I spent the morning making your favorite breakfast, those blueberry pancakes your mom used to make. I bought you flowers. I had a whole day planned. A picnic in the park, tickets to that exhibit you wanted to see. Do you know what you did? She was staring at me, frozen. You called at noon to say you had to work late. Some client emergency. You got home at 10 p.m., ate leftover pizza, and fell asleep on the couch. The flowers died in their vase. The museum tickets expired. I looked her in the eye. You didn't even ask what I'd planned. Marcus, I'm not trying to hurt you, I said, and I meant it. I'm just trying to help you understand why I'm not jumping for joy at the chance to share this money with you. Because for 4 years, you've made it very clear that we don't share things. We keep our lives separate. We maintain our independence. We protect ourselves from each other. She was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. I didn't mean for it to be like this. I thought we could have both independence and intimacy. I thought we could be equals. We were never equals, Vanessa. You made 4 times what I did. You paid 80% of the rent. Every financial decision was a reminder that I was the poor partner, the one who needed your generosity to live in this apartment, to eat at nice restaurants, to exist in your world. I never made you feel that way. You didn't have to. The prenup did it for you. I walked into the living room. I needed space. Air. She followed me, desperate now. Okay, she said. Okay, you're right. I've been a terrible wife. I've been selfish and blind, and I've taken you for granted. But Marcus, we can fix this. We can use this money to fix everything. We can quit our jobs, travel the world, spend real time together. We can start over. Why do we need $15 million to start over? Why couldn't we start over last month or last year? What's different now? Except that I suddenly have something you want. She had no answer for that. We just stood there in the living room, the city lights twinkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lottery ticket still on the kitchen counter like a live grenade. The marriage we'd built, if you could even call it a marriage, was cracking open, and all the things we'd never said were spilling out. I love you, she said finally, desperately. I know I've been a bad wife, but I love you, Marcus. That has to count for something, does it? I asked, not cruelly, just with honest curiosity. Because loving someone means wanting to be with them. It means making time for them. It means remembering their birthday and caring about their dreams and building a life together. Not just living parallel lives in the same space. So what are you saying? You want a divorce? The word hung between us like smoke. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what I want. 24 hours ago, I was just a teacher with a dying car and a marriage that was dying just as slowly. Now I have $15 million and a wife who's suddenly very interested in spending time with me. That's not fair. You keep saying that. But Vanessa, when have we ever been fair to each other? You drafted a prenup that completely protected you and left me with nothing but my dignity and my teacher's salary. Now that same agreement protects me, and suddenly it's not fair. She was shaking her head, tears still streaming down her face. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you'd actually deny your own wife all that money. I haven't decided what I'm going to do, I said. I'm just saying that the decision is mine. The prenup is clear. The money is legally mine. What I do with it, whether I share it, keep it, donate it, set it on fire. That's my choice. Not our choice. My choice. I walked to the bedroom. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the closet. What are you doing? Vanessa asked, her voice small and broken. I'm sleeping on the couch. I need time to think. Marcus, please. Good night, Vanessa. I closed the bedroom door between us. I heard her crying on the other side. A part of me wanted to go back in, to comfort her, to say, of course I'll share the money. Of course we'll figure it out together. That's what the old Marcus would have done. The Marcus who signed the prenup without hesitation. The Marcus who spent 4 years being patient and understanding and quietly disappearing into the background of his wife's busy life. But I was tired of being that Marcus. I lay down on the couch, the expensive leather couch Vanessa had picked out, in the apartment Vanessa owned, in the life Vanessa had built, and I stared at the ceiling. In my wallet, behind my driver's license, was a lottery ticket worth $15 million. In the bedroom, behind a closed door, was a wife who suddenly wanted to be married to me. And in my hands, for the first time in 4 years, I held the power. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I didn't sleep. I just lay on the couch, our couch, her couch, whoever's couch, and watched the city lights paint patterns on the ceiling. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the heating system and the occasional distant wail of a siren from the street below. Around 3 a.m., I heard the bedroom door open. Vanessa's footsteps padded softly into the living room. She stood there for a long moment, and I could feel her watching me, trying to decide if I was asleep. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing steady. Eventually, she padded away. The bedroom door closed again with a soft click. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink, I gave up on sleep. I got up, folded the blanket, put the pillow back in the closet, and made coffee using Vanessa's expensive French press and the organic, fair trade beans she ordered by subscription. I stood by the window with my mug, watching the city wake up below me. Everything looked the same. The same buildings, the same streets, the same early morning joggers and dog walkers going through their routines. But everything was different. I was different. 24 hours ago, I was Marcus Reed, underpaid teacher, ignored husband, a man who couldn't afford to fix his dying car. Now I was Marcus Reed, multimillionaire, the man holding all the cards. The bedroom door opened again. Vanessa emerged, and she looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She was wearing the same t-shirt from last night, wrinkled now, paired with pajama shorts. No makeup, no professional armor, just Vanessa, raw and vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since our wedding night. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey, did you sleep?" "Not really. You?" "No." She walked to the kitchen, poured herself some coffee. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Can we talk?" "Probably a good idea." We sat at the dining room table, the expensive reclaimed wood table Vanessa had found at some boutique furniture store. We'd had hundreds of meals at this table, though rarely together. Usually it was me eating alone while she worked late, or her eating while I graded papers. Two people occupying the same space, but existing in different worlds. Vanessa wrapped her hands around her coffee mug as if trying to draw warmth from it. "I've been thinking all night," she began, "and I think I need to be honest with you. Completely honest in a way I haven't been." I waited. "You were right," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "About everything. About how I've treated you. About how I've let work consume my life. About how I've taken you for granted. I've been a terrible wife. I know it. I've known it for a while. But I kept telling myself that once this case was over or once I made partner, once things calmed down at work, I'd do better. But things never calm down. There's always another case, another deadline, another emergency." She took a shaky breath. "The truth is, I've been hiding. I've been using work as an excuse to avoid being present in our marriage, because being present is scary. It's vulnerable. It means admitting that I need you, that I love you, that I'm not completely self-sufficient and invulnerable. And I've spent my whole life being told that needing people is a weakness." I watched her carefully, trying to gauge how much of this was genuine and how much was a performance designed to get what she wanted. "My mother," Vanessa continued, staring into her coffee, "gave up her career when she married my father. She was a corporate lawyer, brilliant by all accounts. But Dad's career took off and someone had to manage the house, raise the kids, do all the invisible work that made his success possible. So she gave it all up, and she's never forgiven him for it, even though it was technically her choice. Their marriage is this cold, resentful thing where they coexist but barely tolerate each other." She looked up at me, her green eyes shining with unshed tears. "I swore I'd never be like her. I swore I'd never give up my identity for a man. I'd never let myself become dependent. I'd never sacrifice my ambitions for someone else's comfort. So when we got engaged, I wrote that prenup like I was writing a shield. I thought if I could protect my financial independence, keep everything separate and clean, I could have a marriage without the vulnerability, love without the risk. But that's not how love works," I said quietly. "No." She shook her head. "It's not. You can't have intimacy without vulnerability. You can't have a partnership without some level of interdependence." I was so afraid of becoming my mother that I became something worse. A wife in name only, someone who wanted the appearance of marriage without any of the real work or sacrifice that goes with it. She reached a hand across the table, her hand hovering near mine, but not quite touching it. "I know I have no right to ask this. I know I've given you every reason to hate me right now. But Marcus, I'm asking you, begging you, to give me another chance. Not for the money. I don't care about the money." I raised an eyebrow at that. "Okay, I care about the money," she admitted. "I'd be lying if I said I didn't. $15 million is life-changing money. But what I care about more, what I'm terrified of losing, is you. Is this marriage. Is the chance for us to become the people we were supposed to be for each other. And what people are those?" I asked. "Partners," she said simply. "Real partners. People who share a life, not just an address. People who actually know each other, who make time for each other, who choose each other every day instead of just coasting on autopilot." I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold while she was talking. "It's a good speech, Vanessa. Very moving. But here's what I'm struggling with. Is this really you? Or is this who you're pretending to be because I suddenly have something you want?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not. Because here's the thing," I continued. 24 hours ago, before I won the lottery, you came home at 11:30. You barely looked at me. You didn't ask about my day. You took a shower, and went to bed without a real conversation, just like you've done hundreds of times before. But now you're up all night thinking about our marriage. Now you're ready to bare your soul, to admit all your failings, to beg for another chance. The timing is convenient, don't you think? You think I'm lying? Her voice cracked. You think I'm manipulating you? I think you're a very good lawyer who's very good at making persuasive arguments. I think you've spent your entire career figuring out what people want to hear and saying it convincingly. And I think right now, you want access to $15 million badly enough to become whoever you need to be to get it. Vanessa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the window, her arms crossed. When she spoke again, her voice was laced with anger and hurt. You really think that little of me? After 4 years of marriage, you think I'm that shallow? That calculating? I don't know what to think, I said honestly. For years of marriage, and I barely know you, Vanessa. I know your coffee order. I know you hate mushrooms and you love trashy reality TV when you think no one's watching. I know you sing off-key in the shower and you're afraid of spiders. But the important stuff, who you really are, what you really want, whether you really love me or just love the idea of having a husband. I shook my head. I have no idea. She turned to face me. The tears were streaming down her face now. I love you. I have always loved you. I know I've done a terrible job of showing it, but it's true. Do you love this Marcus? I asked. Or do you love the Marcus who doesn't make demands? The Marcus who's easy and uncomplicated and doesn't get in the way of your career? The Marcus who stays quietly in the background of your life? That's not. She stopped herself. She seemed to think about it. Maybe at first, she admitted quietly. Maybe at first I loved how easy you were. How you didn't push me or make me choose between you and my work. How you just accepted whatever scraps of time I could give you without complaining. But somewhere along the way it became real. It became more than convenience. When did I challenge her? When did it become real? Give me a specific moment. She was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, last year. Remember when I lost the Morrison case? I remembered. It had been a huge case, months of work, a client she believed in. She'd lost badly, and it had devastated her. You came to the office, she continued softly. It was late, probably 10 or 11 p.m. I was sitting in the dark, just completely lost. Everyone else had gone home. My colleagues, my bosses, they'd all offered their condolences and moved on. But you came. You didn't say anything about the case. You didn't try to fix it or tell me it would be okay. You just brought Thai food from that place you love, and you sat with me. We ate pad Thai in my dark office, and you told me stupid stories about your students until I laughed. Until I remembered that losing one case didn't mean my whole life was falling apart. She wiped away a tear. That's when I knew. That's when I realized I'd married someone extraordinary, someone who actually cared about me, not my success or my money or my family name, but me, the person under all the armor. And I remember thinking that I needed to do better, to be better, to actually be present for you in the way you were for me. But you didn't, I said. That was 8 months ago, Vanessa. What changed? Nothing changed. That's the problem. I told myself I'd do better, and then I went right back to my old patterns. Because changing is hard, and work is easy. It's easier to bury myself in billable hours than to face the fact that I'm failing at the most important relationship in my life. She came back to the table, sat across from me. I'm not going to sit here and promise you I'll change overnight. I'm not going to tell you the lottery money means nothing to me, because we both know that's not true. But I am telling you, and I need you to hear this, that I would rather lose $15 million than lose you. Would you? I asked. If I told you right now that I'm keeping all the money and filing for divorce, what would you do? She was quiet for a long moment. I'd be devastated. I'd probably fight the divorce. I'd try to prove the prenup shouldn't apply to lottery winnings. I'd drag us both through a legal battle that would cost a fortune and destroy whatever's left between us. Because that's who I am when I'm scared. I fight. I litigate. I turn everything into a battle I can win. At least you're honest about it. But I don't want to do that, she continued. I don't want to be that person anymore. So if that's what you want, if you want to keep the money and in the marriage, I won't fight you. I'll sign whatever papers you put in front of me. I'll walk away. I studied her face, searching for the lie, the calculation, but all I saw was exhaustion and sadness and something that might have been sincerity. I don't want a divorce, I said finally. Hope flared in her eyes. I don't. But I also don't want what we've had for the last 4 years. I don't want to be roommates who occasionally have sex. I don't want separate lives under the same roof. I don't want to feel like the charity case you graciously allow to live in your apartment. So what do you want? It was a fair question. What did I want? I'd been thinking about it all night, but I still didn't have a clear answer. I want time, I said. I need time to think, to figure out what comes next. I need to claim the lottery money, to talk to lawyers and financial advisors, to understand what this means for my life, for our life, for whether we even have a life together. Okay, she said quietly. How much time? I don't know. A few weeks. A month. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we live our lives. You go to work, I go to work. We coexist. We try to be civil. But Vanessa, I looked her in the eye. Don't expect me to make any promises right now. Don't expect me to say everything's going to be okay, or that I forgive you, or that we're going to use the money to buy a house and live happily ever after. Because I don't know if that's what I want anymore. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I understand. And one more thing, I added. Don't tell anyone about the lottery yet. Not your parents, not your friends, no one. I need to figure out how to handle this without the whole world knowing. Of course, whatever you need. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, both staring at our cold coffee, both lost in thoughts about a future that had become suddenly and frighteningly uncertain. Finally, Vanessa stood up. I should get ready for work. I have a deposition at 9. Okay. She started to walk toward the bedroom, then paused. Marcus, thank you. For what? For not making this easy. For not just accepting my apology and pretending everything's fine. For making me really face what I've done to us. She gave a sad smile. You'd be well within your rights to be cruel right now, but you're not. That's why I love you. Because I have always loved you, even when I was too busy to show it. She disappeared into the bedroom before I could respond. I sat alone at the table, listening to the sounds of her getting ready, the shower running, the hairdryer, the closet doors opening and closing, the familiar morning symphony of Vanessa preparing to be powerful, invincible, the corporate lawyer who never showed weakness. But now I'd seen her weakness. I'd seen her cry and beg and admit her failings. The question was, did that change anything? Did vulnerability make up for 4 years of neglect? Did one honest conversation erase hundreds of nights spent alone? I pulled out my phone, Googled how to claim lottery winnings, and started to read. There was a process. Signing the ticket, contacting the lottery commission, choosing between a lump sum or an annuity, hiring lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors. Every website stressed the same thing. Don't tell anyone. Don't make any sudden decisions. Take your time. Good advice. Too bad I'd already told Vanessa. She emerged from the bedroom 40 minutes later, completely transformed. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, wearing a power suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. The vulnerable woman from before was gone, replaced by the armor I knew so well. I'll be home by 7, she said, and it sounded like a promise. I'll bring dinner. We can eat together. Really talk if you want. Okay, I said. She picked up her briefcase, her keys, headed for the door. Then she paused one more time, turned back to me. The money's yours, she said. Legally, morally, in every way that matters. I get that now. Whatever you decide to do with it, I'll support your decision. I mean it. Then she was gone, leaving me alone in the apartment with my coffee and my thoughts and a lottery ticket that was either going to save my marriage or destroy it. I pulled out my phone again, stared at it for a long moment. Then I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I had 15 million reasons to take a personal day. The Lottery Commission office was in a nondescript government building downtown, the kind that looks deliberately boring so as not to attract attention. I'd called ahead, made an appointment, and been told to bring 2 forms of ID and a signed ticket. I'd also been strongly advised to bring a lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer. I had my driver's license, my passport, and the lottery ticket sealed in a plastic baggie like it was a piece of crime scene evidence. The waiting room was empty except for me and a middle-aged woman who looked like she'd been crying. She was clutching her own lottery ticket with trembling hands, though I had no idea if she was a winner or just someone still hoping. We didn't make eye contact. This wasn't the kind of place where people made small talk. Marcus Reed. A woman in her 50s appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard. She wore glasses on a chain and had the weary expression of someone who's seen too many lottery winners make terrible decisions. That's me. I'm Patricia Joyner, Director of Claims. Follow me, please. I followed her down a hallway painted in institutional beige, past offices where people processed forms and managed the machinery of hope and disappointment. She led me into a small conference room with a table for chairs and absolutely no windows. "Have a seat," she said, sitting across from me with her clipboard. "First things first, do you have the ticket?" I took out the plastic baggie and slid it across the table. She examined it carefully, compared the numbers to something on her computer screen, and nodded with satisfaction. "Congratulations, Mr. Reed. This is, in fact, a winning ticket for the $15 million jackpot." She said it like she was confirming a dental appointment, matter of fact and professional. "Now, before we proceed, I need to explain your options and make sure you understand what you're getting into." "Agreed?" "You have two payout options, a lump sum or an annuity. The lump sum is approximately $8.7 million after taxes. The annuity pays out over 30 years and would get you the full $15 million, though also after taxes, which comes to about $9.2 million total spread over 3 decades. I'd already researched this, but hearing the numbers out loud made them real in a way Google searches hadn't. $8.7 million. It was more money than I'd make in 5 lifetimes as a teacher. "Most people take the lump sum," Patricia continued. "The annuity sounds nice in theory, but it locks you into a long-term payment structure that may not suit your needs. Plus, people tend to want their money now, not in 30 years. "I'll take the lump sum," I said. She made a note on her clipboard. "Smart choice, in my opinion. Now, Mr. Reed, I'm required to give you some unsolicited advice. Most lottery winners, and I mean most, we're talking 90%, end up bankrupt within 5 years. They make bad investments. They give money to every friend and family member who asks. They buy things they can't maintain. They don't understand that winning the lottery isn't the end of your financial worries. It's the beginning." "I understand." "Do you really?" "Because you're sitting here without a lawyer, without a financial advisor, without any professional guidance at all. That concerns me. I called in sick this morning," I said. "Yesterday, I was grading papers and worrying about my car breaking down. Give me a little credit for needing time to process this." She smiled slightly, the first hint of warmth I'd seen from her. "Fair enough. Here's what I recommend. Before you do anything else, you assemble a team. A lawyer who specializes in estate planning and asset protection, a certified financial planner, preferably a fiduciary, a tax accountant who understands lottery winnings. You have those 3 people in place before you spend a single dollar. Agreed? Also, and this is important, don't tell anyone you've won. I know it's exciting. I know you want to share the news, but the moment people know you have money, they will come out of the woodwork. Friends you haven't spoken to in years, distant relatives, sob stories, business opportunities, investment schemes. Trust me, it's better to keep this quiet for as long as possible." I thought of Vanessa, of how I'd already broken that rule. "And your wife?" Patricia's expression shifted slightly. "You're married?" "For years." "And does your wife know about the winnings?" "Yes." "How did she react?" I hesitated. "It's complicated." "It always is." Patricia leaned back in her chair. She studied me with the air of someone who's seen this movie before. "Let me guess. You have a prenup." "How did you know?" "Because you look terrified. And the only reason a lottery winner looks terrified instead of ecstatic is if they're worried about who else has a claim on the money." She tapped her pen against her clipboard. "I'm not a lawyer, Mr. Reed, so I can't give you legal advice. But I can tell you that lottery winnings in a marriage are often considered marital property, regardless of who bought the ticket. Unless there's a prenup that specifically addresses winnings," I said. Her eyebrows went up. "Your prenup specifically addresses winnings?" "It does. It says any wealth acquired during the marriage belongs solely to the person who acquired it." "Well then," Patricia almost smiled, "I'd say you need to talk to that lawyer sooner rather than later, because your wife is probably talking to hers right now." That thought sent a chill down my spine. Was Vanessa at work, or was she in some lawyer's office trying to find a loophole in the prenup she'd written herself? "How long does the claim process take?" I asked. "We can process everything today if you're ready. The money will be wired to your bank account within 5 business days. But, Mr. Reed," she looked at me seriously, "I need you to think very carefully about what happens after that money hits your account. Your life is about to change in ways you can't imagine. Money doesn't solve problems, it amplifies them. If your marriage is shaky, money will make it shakier. If you have bad habits, money will make them worse. Whatever issues exist in your life right now, They're all about to get bigger. Cheerful. Honest. I've been in this job for 15 years. I've seen lottery winners lose everything. Their money, their families, their friends, sometimes their lives. I've also seen a handful of winners who handle it well, who use the money to build something good. The difference between those two groups isn't luck, it's planning, discipline, and having the courage to say no to the people you love. She slid a packet of papers across the table. These are the claim forms. Read them carefully. Sign where indicated. And Mr. Reed, get that lawyer before you go home tonight. I spent the next hour reading and signing documents, each one more surreal than the last. Tax forms that acknowledged I understood my obligations to the IRS. Liability waivers that confirmed I wasn't being coerced. Publicity options. I could choose to be publicly identified as the winner or remain anonymous. I chose anonymous without a second's hesitation. Finally, it was done. Patricia gathered all the paperwork, made copies, and handed me a folder with my copies neatly organized inside. The money will be in your account by the end of next week, she said, walking me back to the lobby. Until then, try not to think about it too much. Live your normal life. And Mr. Reed? Good luck. You're going to need it. I stepped out of the building and stood on the sidewalk, blinking in the bright afternoon sun. Cars rushed past. People hurried by with their coffees and their phones and their ordinary problems. None of them knew that the guy in jeans and a worn jacket was about to have $8.7 million deposited into his checking account. I pulled out my phone, started searching for lawyers, estate planning lawyers, asset protection lawyers, family law lawyers. The search results were overwhelming. Hundreds of options, all claiming to be the best, all speaking a language of legalese I barely understood. Finally, I called the only person I knew who might be able to help. Marcus. Vanessa answered on the second ring, and I could hear the surprise in her voice. I never called her at work. Is everything okay? I need a recommendation for a lawyer, I said. Someone good, who specializes in estate planning and asset protection. Silence on the other end. Then, you claimed the ticket this morning, without telling me. You were at work. And Patricia, the claims director, suggested I get professional advice before I do anything else. More silence. I could almost hear her thinking, calculating. David Brennan, she said finally. He's a partner at Hoffman & Lee, one of the best estate attorneys in the city. I'll text you his number. Thanks. Marcus, she paused. Are you okay? I don't know. Are you? No, she admitted. I've been distracted all morning. My assistant keeps asking if I'm feeling all right. I keep thinking about last night, about what you said, about what happens next. Yeah, me too. Will you be home for dinner? I want to talk. Really talk. Not like this morning where I just kind of vomited my feelings all over you and didn't give you any space to respond. I don't know yet. I'm going to try to meet with this lawyer today if he can fit me in. Okay. Well, text me if you're going to be late. I will. I hung up. I leaned against the building, tried to process the strangeness of that conversation. Vanessa asking if I was okay. Vanessa wanting to talk. Vanessa sounding almost unsure of herself. It was so different from the confident, controlled woman I'd married that it felt like talking to a stranger. My phone buzzed with a text. David Brennan's contact information, followed by a second text from Vanessa. He knows you're calling. I reached out on your behalf. He's expecting you. V. I stared at the texts. She'd done me a favor. She'd used her professional connections to help me protect assets that she had no claim to, that I'd made it clear I didn't intend to share. It was either incredibly generous or incredibly calculated. I had no idea which. I called David Brennan. His secretary answered, confirmed my appointment. Yes, Mr. Reed, we were expecting you. Mr. Brennan has a cancellation at 3 if you can make it. And she gave me the address. A high-rise downtown. 37th floor. The kind of building where lawyers charged hourly rates that used to make me nauseous. Used to. Past tense. Because now I could afford it. I had 3 hours to kill. I walked to a coffee shop, ordered an Americano, sat in a corner, and tried to feel like myself. But everything felt strange, like I was wearing someone else's skin. The other patrons looked at me like I was just another guy in jeans working on a laptop or killing time before an appointment. They had no idea. No one had any idea. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Derek, asking how I was, if the ticket was real, if I needed anything. Texts from other friends who'd heard from Derek that something had happened. I ignored them all. Patricia's advice echoed in my head. Don't tell anyone. Too late for that, but at least I could stop the spread. At 2:45, I walked to Hoffman and Lee. The building was all glass and steel and intimidation. The kind of place where even the elevator operators looked expensive. The 37th floor was quiet and elegant. All dark wood, leather furniture, and art that was probably worth more than my car. The receptionist looked up as I entered, her smile professional and cool. "Mr. Reed?" "Yes. Mr. Brennan is ready for you. Right this way, please." She led me through a maze of hallways lined with offices where lawyers worked behind closed doors, managing the legal problems of people rich enough to afford this place. Finally, she opened a door to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. David Brennan stood up to greet me. He was in his mid-50s, silver-haired. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, but his handshake was firm and his smile seemed genuine. "Marcus, please sit." He gestured to a leather chair across from his massive desk. "Vanessa spoke very highly of you when she called. She said you'd come into some money and needed guidance on how to protect it. That's one way of putting it." He smiled. "Why don't you tell me the whole story? And don't worry about the clock. Vanessa's firm has sent us enough business over the years that I'm happy to give you a consultation at no charge. Consider it a professional courtesy." So I told him everything. The lottery ticket, the prenup, the conversation with Vanessa, the claim I'd filed that morning. David listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad, his expression neutral and professional. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Well," he said, "you've certainly found yourself in an interesting situation. The good news is, from a legal standpoint, the prenup seems to be very much in your favor. If it specifically addresses prizes and wealth acquired during the marriage, and if it was executed properly with full disclosure, then yes, the money is yours. And the bad news? The bad news is that yours is a legal designation, not an emotional one. You're married to a woman who presumably has feelings about this money, who may feel entitled to share in it regardless of what the prenup says. And money, especially this much money, has a way of destroying relationships. I'm aware. Are you?" David leaned forward. "Marcus, I'm going to be blunt with you. I've handled enough divorces to know that this lottery win will either save your marriage or end it. There's no middle ground. If you choose to keep the money separate, to strictly enforce the prenup, your wife will either accept it gracefully, which in my experience people rarely do, or she'll resent you for it. That resentment will poison everything, and you'll eventually end up back in my office. Only next time it'll be to file for divorce. And if I share it with her, then you're choosing to override the prenup, to treat the money as marital property despite the legal agreement. That sets a precedent. It tells your wife that the prenup doesn't really matter, that you'll ignore it when it's convenient. Which may be fine now, but what about next time? What if she inherits money from her family? Will she be as generous with you as you were with her? I hadn't thought of that. The prenup protected us both, in theory. If I broke it now, what was to stop her from claiming it didn't matter later? So what do? I asked. David smiled. "That's not a legal question, Marcus. That's a marriage question. What I can do is help you protect yourself legally, regardless of what you decide emotionally. We can set up trusts, create asset protection structures, make sure that even if you choose to share some of the money, you do it in a controlled, strategic way." Controlled and strategic. How romantic. Marriage and money rarely are. He pulled out a fresh legal pad, started making notes. "Here's what I recommend. We create an irrevocable trust for the majority of the funds. You're the sole beneficiary, with provisions for how the money can be used. This protects the assets not just from your wife, but from creditors, lawsuits, anyone who might come after you. Then, if you decide you want to share some of the money with Vanessa, you can gift her specific amounts from the trust, controlled distributions that you maintain oversight on. So I keep the power." "You keep the power," he confirmed. "Because Marcus, whether you realize it or not, you have all the power right now. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" I walked out of David Brennan's office 3 hours later with a leather briefcase full of documents I barely understood and a plan that felt both empowering and terrifying. He'd outlined a comprehensive asset protection strategy, an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary, a separate LLC for any investments, a detailed estate plan that would shield the money from creditors, lawsuits, and most importantly, divorce proceedings. "This is a fortress," David had said, tapping the folder. "Nothing gets in unless you allow it, including your wife." The paperwork would take a few weeks to finalize. In the meantime, the lottery money would sit in my regular checking account, the same account that usually held about $3,000 and was used for my share of the groceries and utilities. In 5 business days, that balance would increase by $8.7 million. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It was after 7 when I got home. The apartment was lit up, and it smelled like something was cooking. Real cooking, not takeout. I opened the door to find Vanessa in the kitchen, wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup. She was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot, and for a moment she looked like someone I used to know, before the corporate wardrobe and the 80-hour weeks. "Hey," she said, looking up with a tentative smile. "I'm making pasta. I remembered you said you loved my mom's bolognese recipe, so I thought I'd try to recreate it." I probably messed it up. I had to call her for the recipe, and she asked why I was suddenly cooking, and I had to make up a story about wanting to be more domestic, and I'm rambling. I'm nervous. Anyway, it'll be ready in about 10 minutes. I put down my briefcase, the new leather one David had given me, saying that every man with $8.7 million needed to look the part. "You called your mom for a recipe?" "I know. Shocking." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "I haven't cooked anything more complicated than scrambled eggs in probably 2 years, but I wanted to, I don't know. I wanted to do something for you. Something normal. It smells good." "It does?" She looked genuinely pleased. I wasn't sure. The recipe said to add wine, but I didn't know if it was red or white, so I just used that Chianti we got as a wedding gift and never opened. The wedding gift Chianti. We'd gotten it 4 years ago from one of Vanessa's law professors, and it had been sitting on the wine rack ever since, waiting for a special occasion that never seemed special enough. "It's probably perfect," I said. We moved carefully around each other in the kitchen, like 2 people who'd forgotten how to share a space. She served the pasta while I set the table, the real table, with cloth napkins instead of paper towels. She poured wine into proper glasses. We sat across from each other like we were on a first date, awkward and unsure. "How is it with David?" she asked, twirling pasta on her fork, but not eating. "Good. He's drawing up some papers, asset protection, trusts, that kind of thing. Smart." She took a sip of wine. "He's one of the best. If anyone can help you navigate this, it's him. He said you called in a favor for me." "It wasn't a favor. I just wanted to make sure you had good advice. This is too important to trust to just anyone." She finally tasted the pasta, chewed thoughtfully. "It's terrible. Be honest. It's actually really good." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Don't sound so surprised. I used to cook, you know. Before work, ate my entire life." We ate in silence for a few minutes. It wasn't uncomfortable, exactly, but it was loaded with everything we weren't saying. "Marcus," Vanessa said finally, putting her fork down. "I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about not knowing me, about how we're basically strangers who happen to be married." "Vanessa, no, let me finish, please." She took a breath. "You were right about everything. I've been so focused on protecting myself, on maintaining my independence, on proving I didn't need anyone, that I forgot to build a real marriage. I forgot to let you in." She reached her hand across the table, and this time her hand found mine. "So I want to try something. Starting tonight, I want us to really get to know each other. You ask me anything you want to know, and I'll do the same. We'll take turns, and we have to answer honestly. No lawyer answers, no deflections, just the truth." I looked at her hand covering mine, the wedding ring that matched my own. "Like a game, like a lifeline," she said quietly. "Please." I thought about it. This could be a manipulation, another calculated move to get closer to the money. Or it could be genuine, a real attempt to salvage something worthwhile. I had no way of knowing which. "Okay," I said finally. "You go first." She thought for a moment. "What's your happiest memory in your whole life?" "That's your first question? I want to know what joy looks like for you. What you hold on to when things are hard." I considered lying, giving her something easy and romantic, maybe something from our wedding day or our honeymoon. But she'd asked for the truth. "I was 14, I said. My dad had just lost his job at the manufacturing plant. Money was tight, tighter than usual. My mom was working double shifts as a nurse. My sister and I knew things were bad, even though our parents tried to hide it. One Saturday, Dad woke us up at dawn and said we were going on an adventure. He piled us all into our beat-up station wagon, an old thing that barely ran, and we drove 2 hours to the beach." I smiled at the memory. We couldn't afford a hotel, so we just spent the whole day there. Just the four of us, swimming and building sandcastles and eating peanut butter sandwiches my mom had packed. Dad taught me how to body search. I smiled at the memory. We couldn't afford a hotel, so we just spent the whole day there. Just the four of us, swimming and building sandcastles and eating peanut butter sandwiches my mom had packed. Dad taught me how to body surf. My sister buried me in the sand up to my neck, and when the sun started to set, we just sat there and watched it, not saying anything, just being together. On the drive home, my sister and I fell asleep in the back seat. And I remember waking up briefly and hearing my parents talking quietly in the front. My mom said, "We can't afford days like this." And my dad said, "We can't afford not to." Vanessa was silent. Her eyes were shining. "That's beautiful." "Your turn," I said. "Same question. Happiest memory." She pulled her hand back, picked up her wine glass, stared into it as if it held answers. I was 8. My parents were having a huge party, some business thing. All their rich friends in expensive clothes, drinking expensive wine. I was supposed to stay upstairs in my room, but I snuck down and hid under the buffet table, just watching everyone's feet. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, she died when I was 12, she found me there. Instead of making me go back upstairs, she crawled under the table with me in her designer dress. We sat there together, making up stories about people based on just their shoes. She said that expensive shoes didn't mean anything about the person wearing them, that the most interesting people often wore the most boring shoes. She smiled at the memory. We stayed under that table for an hour, just the two of us, while her daughter's party went on above us. She never told my mom. It was our secret, and when she died 4 years later, I wore the most boring shoes I could find to her funeral, and my mother was furious. But I knew Grandma would have loved it. "I didn't know that about you," I said softly. "There's a lot you don't know about me. That's the problem." She refilled our wine glasses. "Your turn. Ask me something." I thought about all the things I wanted to know. All the questions that had been piling up for 4 years of superficial conversations. "Why did you really marry me?" She didn't flinch at the question. "Because you were the first man I ever met who didn't want something from me. All the guys I dated before you, they wanted my money or my connections or the status of saying they were dating a Harwell. They wanted the version of me that looked good at parties and on their arm. But you," she shook her head, "you liked me when I was a mess. You made me laugh. You didn't care that I came from a family with money or that I was going to be a lawyer. You cared about who I was when no one was watching." "And now?" I asked. "Why do you want to stay married to me now?" "That's 2 questions," she said, but she was smiling. "But I'll answer it. I want to stay married to you because somewhere along the way, you became my safe place. Even when I was too busy to appreciate it, even when I took you for granted, I knew you were there, steady, reliable, my home. And I'm terrified that I've destroyed that I took your patience and your kindness and your constant presence and just squandered it." I felt a lump in my throat. "You haven't squandered it, haven't I?" She blinked back tears. "Marcus, be honest. If I weren't your wife, if you met me today, the workaholic who's never home, who doesn't remember your birthday, who cares more about her career than her relationships, would you even want to get to know me?" It was a fair question, and the answer was complicated. "I don't know," I admitted. "But that's not who you were when I met you. You were ambitious, yes, but you were also fun. You laughed at my bad jokes. You dragged me to art galleries and made me explain why I thought modern art was pretentious, and then you'd defend it with so much passion that I'd end up changing my mind. You fell asleep during movies but insisted on finishing them anyway. You sang off-key to the music in the car and didn't care who heard you." "I miss her too," Vanessa said quietly. "That version of me. I don't know when she disappeared. She didn't disappear. She just got buried under all the work and the pressure and the need to prove yourself." She was crying now, silent tears running down her face. "Can I get her back? Is it too late?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I think if you want to try, I'm willing to see what happens." She wiped her eyes with her napkin. "Even though I have no claim to your money? Even though I wrote a prenup that explicitly cuts me out? This isn't about the money, Vanessa. It's about whether we can build something real, something that isn't based on contracts and legal protection and separate property. The money is mine. Yes, the prenup is clear. But a marriage, a real marriage, that's ours. If we both want it." "I want it," she said fiercely. "I want us. Not your money, not the lifestyle $15 million could buy. Just us. The possibility of us." I believed her. In that moment, with pasta growing cold on our plates and wine warming in our glasses and tears on her face, I actually believed her. Okay, I said, then let's figure out what that looks like. We talked for 3 more hours, abandoning the pasta, opening another bottle of wine, and just talking. Really talking, in a way we hadn't in years. She asked me about my students, and I really told her. I told her about Jamie, who was brilliant but suffered from test anxiety, about Marcus Jr., yes, named after me, whose parents were alumni, who was probably going to get a basketball scholarship, about the essay on the civil rights movement that had made me cry because it was so beautifully written. I asked her about her cases, and she told me not the boring logistics, but the human stories behind them. The small business owner fighting a predatory contract, the woman trying to get a fair divorce settlement from her abusive husband, the pro bono work she'd been doing that she'd never mentioned because she thought I wouldn't be interested. Why wouldn't I be interested? I asked. Because it's not billable hours. It's not climbing the ladder. It's just helping people who need it. I thought you'd think it was me trying to assuage my guilt for being rich. I'd think it was you being who you're supposed to be. She smiled at that. Really smiled. And I saw a flash of the woman I'd married. Around midnight, we finally cleaned the kitchen together, washing dishes, putting away leftovers, moving around each other with a little less awkwardness than before. When we were done, Vanessa turned to me, hesitant. I know you slept on the couch last night, she said, and I know things are still uncertain. But, would you sleep in the bed tonight? Not for anything else. Just to sleep. I miss having you there. I thought about the fortress David Brennan was building for me, the asset protection and the trust and the legal walls that would keep Vanessa away from my money. I thought about the power and the control and the self-protection. Then I thought about my father taking his family to the beach when they couldn't afford it, because they couldn't afford not to. Yes, I said, I'll sleep in the bed. That night we lay in the dark on opposite sides of the mattress, not touching, but not miles apart either. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I fell asleep to the sound of someone else's breathing, and I didn't feel alone. When I woke up in the morning, Vanessa was already awake, propped up on her elbow, watching me. Hey, she said. Hey, I'm calling in sick to work. First time in 3 years. You are? Yeah. I thought maybe we could spend the day together. Do something normal. Not talk about money or prenups or the future, just be together. Like a date. I thought about my own class, my students, the lesson plan I had prepared. Then I thought about what mattered more. I called in sick yesterday, I said, so I probably should go to work. Her face fell slightly. But, I continued, I could call in sick again. Make it 2 days in a row. Really commit to the delinquency. She laughed, and it was the sound I'd fallen in love with 4 years ago. Let's be delinquent together. So we were. We spent the day being deliberately ordinary. Vanessa wanted to go to the botanical gardens, a place she'd been meaning to visit for 2 years, but had never found the time for. I'd suggested it once, months ago, and she'd put it on her mental list of someday activities that never made it to her calendar. Now, on a Wednesday morning when we both should have been at work, we drove there in my dying Civic, the engine making its worrying noises as Vanessa sat in the passenger seat and didn't once complain about the duct-taped dashboard or the broken air conditioning. I'd forgotten what your car sounded like, she said as we pulled into the parking lot. Like it's dying. Like it's trying really hard not to die. There's a difference. She looked at me, and something in her expression was soft. You should get a new car. You know, you can afford it now. Maybe, I said. But this one still works, mostly. We walked through the gardens holding hands, something we hadn't done since our honeymoon. The gardens were mostly empty on a weekday morning. Just us, a few elderly couples, and an artist sketching by the lily pond. Vanessa had her phone in her purse, and I could see her physically restraining herself from checking it every 5 minutes. You can look at it if you need to, I said. I don't need to. That's the problem. I've convinced myself I always need to, that every email is urgent, that the world will fall apart if I'm not constantly available. But the world isn't falling apart. It's still spinning. My cases are being handled by associates. My clients will survive without me for 1 day. We found a bench near the rose garden and sat. The morning sun was warm, and the air smelled like flowers and fresh mulch. A pair of sparrows were fighting over a piece of bread someone had left behind. Tell me something else I don't know about you, I said, and make it a small thing. Vanessa thought about it. I'm afraid of butterflies. What? I know it's ridiculous. They're beautiful and harmless, and everyone loves them. But when I was 5, We came to a butterfly exhibit, and one of them landed on my face. It was huge, one of those blue morphos, and its legs felt weird and scratchy. I started screaming, and my mother was so embarrassed she yanked me out of there and told me I was being dramatic. Ever since then, butterflies give me a panic attack. So we're in a garden, potentially filled with butterflies, and you didn't say anything? I wanted to be here with you more than I wanted to avoid butterflies. She squeezed my hand. Your turn. Tell me something small. I wanted to be a writer, I said. In college, I majored in history because it was practical, but what I really wanted to do was write novels, historical fiction specifically. I even started one once, about a soldier in World War I. I wrote about 60 pages before I realized I had no idea how to write a novel and gave up. Do you still have it? The 60 pages? Somewhere. In a box. In a storage unit, probably. Why? Because you have time now. You could finish it. You could write 10 novels if you wanted to. You don't have to teach forever just because you've been teaching for 5 years. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. In the last 48 hours, I'd been so focused on protecting the money, on the legal logistics, on what the windfall meant for my marriage, that I hadn't thought about what it meant for my life, for my choices, for the possibilities that suddenly existed. I like teaching, I said. I know. But do you love it? Or is it just safe? I didn't have an answer for that. We left the gardens around noon and drove to a diner I'd been going to since before I met her. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths, laminated menus, and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner for 3 hours. Vanessa had never been there. In 4 years of marriage, we'd never gone to my places, my world. We'd always existed in hers. This is very, she looked around, at the faded decor, the flickering fluorescent lights, the waitress with a name tag that said Doreen, who looked like she'd been working there since the 70s. Divey, I supplied. I was going to say authentic. She picked up the menu, smiled at the prices. You can get a full breakfast for $6. That's less than my morning latte. That's the point. Doreen appeared at our table, her pencil poised over her notepad. Will it be, hon? I ordered my usual blueberry pancakes and coffee. Vanessa studied the menu like it was a legal brief, finally settling on the number 3. Eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast. How do you want your eggs, honey? Doreen asked. Over easy, please. And could I get those with egg whites instead of whole eggs? Doreen stared at her like she'd just asked for caviar. Egg whites. This is a diner, sweetheart, not a spa. You want eggs or not? Vanessa blinked, surprised by the bluntness. Then she laughed, a real, full-bellied laugh that made other diners turn to look. Regular eggs are fine. Scrambled. Thank you. That's more like it. Doreen winked at me. Finally bringing your girl out to see the real world. Huh, Marcus? Something like that. After Doreen left, Vanessa was still smiling. She's amazing. Does she always talk to customers like that? Pretty much. The food's cheap and good, and Doreen doesn't take any crap from anyone. It's part of the charm. I love it. She looked around the diner with interest, at the regulars sitting at the counter, at the cook visible through the pass-through window, at the community bulletin board covered in flyers for lost cats and guitar lessons. This is where you come when you're not at home. Sometimes, after basketball games, or when I need to grade papers somewhere that isn't the apartment. Derek and I come here for breakfast sometimes on Saturdays. I paused. I always thought you'd hate it. Too working class for your tastes. Really? Is that what you think of me? She looked hurt. That I'm a snob who can't appreciate a good diner? I don't know what to think of you. That's the whole problem, remember? She was quiet for a moment. I know I've been picky about where we go, what we do. But it's not because I'm a snob. It's because I've been performing. Being the right kind of wife, going to the right kind of places, maintaining the right kind of image. I've been so worried about what people think that I forgot to just live. The food arrived, interrupting the moment. Doreen set our plates down with a clatter, refilled our coffee without asking, and disappeared again. Vanessa looked at her plate, piled high with eggs and bacon and definitely not health-conscious hash browns, and picked up her fork like she was about to embark on an adventure. This is a lot of food, she said. You don't have to eat all of it. I don't want to. When was the last time I ate a real breakfast? Not a protein bar at my desk or a smoothie in the car, but a real breakfast. She tried the hash browns, closed her eyes. Oh my God, these are amazing. What's in them? Salt, butter, and probably some things we're better off not knowing. I don't care. They're better than anything I've had at brunch places that charge $30. We ate in a comfortable silence for a while. The diner buzzed with quiet conversations, the clatter of plates, and the sizzle of the grill. It was so completely removed from Vanessa's usual world of client dinners, networking events, and pristine restaurants where everything was an experience. "Marcus," she said finally, pushing her half-finished plate away. "Can I ask you something? And I need you to be completely honest." "Okay. Do you resent me? For the prenup? For how I've treated you? For all of it?" I put my fork down. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I did, I admitted. For a long time, yes. I resented coming home to an empty apartment. I resented paying 20% of the rent on a place that never felt like mine. I resented the way you talked about my career and my money and my apartment like I was just a guest in your life. I resented you for making me feel small. She flinched, but didn't interrupt. But I also resented myself, I continued, for signing the prenup in the first place, for not standing up for what I needed, for being so afraid of losing you that I just agreed to whatever terms you set. I let you treat our marriage like a business arrangement because I was too scared to demand more. And now? She asked quietly, "Do you still resent me?" "Now I'm just tired. Tired of resenting you. Tired of feeling less than. Tired of living in this weird limbo where we're married but not really partners." I looked her in the eye. The lottery money changed things, but not in the way you might think. It didn't make me greedy or power hungry. It just gave me options. For the first time in our marriage, I have the ability to leave if I want to be fine on my own. And that's both terrifying and liberating. "Are you going to leave?" "I don't know. Are you going to give me a reason to stay?" She reached across the table, took both of my hands in hers. "I'm going to try. I'm going to try so hard, Marcus. Not for the money, not because I'm scared of being alone, but because when I think about losing you, really losing you, I can't breathe. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. And I've been treating you like you're disposable, like you'll always be there, no matter how badly I behave. I'm not disposable. I know that now. I just need you to believe that I can change, that I can be the partner you deserve." Doreen appeared with the check, interrupting again. "You two get things worked out?" Vanessa laughed, surprised. "Were we that obvious?" "Honey, I've been slinging eggs for 30 years. I can spot couple drama from across the room." She winked at me again. "This one's a keeper, Marcus. Don't you go letting some fancy lawyers and prenups ruin a good thing." After Doreen left, Vanessa stared at the check. "Do all the people in your life know about the prenup?" "I may have mentioned it to a few people over the years when I needed to vent." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That I signed a prenup that protects all of your assets and gives me no claim to anything you earn or inherit during our marriage." "And what did they say?" "Derek said I was an idiot. My mom cried. My dad asked if I was sure I knew what I was doing. I pulled out my wallet, put some cash on the table. They all thought you were using me, that you wanted a husband for appearances but didn't want a real partner. They were right. I don't know. Were they?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked up the check, looked at the total. $16.47. "Can I get this? You want to buy breakfast at a diner? I want to contribute to something, even if it's just $16. She took out her wallet, put down a 20. "Keep the changes for Doreen. She earned it." We left the diner and walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, past pawn shops and laundromats and corner stores. This was my part of town, the one I'd inhabited before I moved into Vanessa's building. The part she'd probably driven through, but never really seen. "I had no idea this was here," she said, looking around. "We're only 2 miles from my apartment, but it's like a different world. It is a different world. My world, that you've never been a part of." She stopped walking, turned to face me. "Then show it to me. Show me your world, Marcus. I want to understand where you come from, what you care about, who you are when you're not just my husband." So I did. I showed her the Thai restaurant below my old apartment, where I'd eaten 3 times a week because it was cheap and good and the owners always gave me extra spring rolls. I showed her the basketball court where I played pickup games every Sunday morning with guys from the neighborhood. I showed her the used bookstore where I'd spent hours browsing, usually walking out with books I couldn't afford but bought anyway because they called to me. "This is where I got your wedding present," I said, standing outside the bookstore. "Remember that first edition of Pride and Prejudice? The one you said you found at an estate sale?" She looked stricken. "I bought it here. I saved for 3 months. The owner, Mr. Chun, he held it for me. He let me pay in installments. You'd mentioned you loved Jane Austen once, in passing, and I wanted to get you something meaningful, something that showed I'd been paying attention. I barely even looked at it, She whispered. I thank you. I put it on a shelf, and I don't think I've touched it since. I know. God, Marcus, I'm such a you're not. You were just focused on other things, things that seemed more important at the time. We walked back to the car in silence. The day had shifted somehow. It had become heavier with the weight of all the things we'd never acknowledged, all the ways we'd failed each other. Thank you, Vanessa said as we got in the car. For today, for showing me your world, for giving me a chance to see who you really are. We're not fixed, Vanessa. One good day doesn't undo 4 years of problems. I know, but it's a start, isn't it? It's something. Yeah, I nodded. It's something. We drove home in the dying Civic with its worrying noises, and for the first time since I'd won the lottery, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could figure this out. The money hit my account on Monday morning. I was in the middle of my second period class on the New Deal when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it. I had a strict no-phone policy during class that applied as much to me as it did to my students. But it vibrated again and again. By the time the bell rang, I had 7 notifications waiting. I checked my banking app in the hallway between classes, surrounded by the chaos of shouting teenagers and slamming locker doors. And there it was, $8,734,691.52. My previous balance had been $2,831.33. I just stood there, staring at my phone screen as students flowed around me like water around a rock. One of them, Jamie, the anxious one, stopped and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, that I'd just gotten some surprising news. He nodded and hurried off to his next class, and I kept staring at the number that had fundamentally altered my reality. Derek found me still standing there 5 minutes later. Dude, you're going to be late for third period. It's in my account, I said, showing him the screen. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the empty classroom across the hall. He shut the door. Holy crap. It's real. It's really real. It's really real. How do you feel? Scared? Excited? Nauseous? Like I'm going to either throw up or pass out or both. I sat down at a random student desk, the kind I'd sat behind thousands of times as a teacher, but which suddenly felt absurdly small and uncomfortable. What am I supposed to do now? Well, first you're going to teach third period because those kids have a test today, and you're the only one who can administer it. Then you're going to get through the rest of your day like a normal person. And then, he grinned, then you're going to buy me the most expensive dinner I've ever had because I'm your best friend, and that's how friendship works. I laughed, in spite of everything. That's your advice? Dinner? My advice is don't change who you are just because you have money. You're still Marcus Reed, history teacher and mediocre basketball coach. You still have a job to do and students who need you. The money doesn't change that. It changes everything. Only if you let it. I made it through third period somehow, administering the test on the Great Depression, the irony of my situation not lost on me. Here I was, suddenly wealthy beyond measure, teaching kids about breadlines and unemployment and the complete collapse of the economy. Several students asked if I was feeling okay. I told them I was fine, just hadn't slept well. At lunch, I called Vanessa from my car. The money's in the account, I said when she answered. Silence on the other end. Then all of it. All of it. How do you feel? It was the same question Derek had asked, but coming from Vanessa it felt different, loaded with implications about our future, about what this money meant for us. Weird, I said honestly. Like I'm wearing someone else's life. Are you going to quit your job? The question surprised me. Why would I quit? Because you can. Because you never have to work again if you don't want to. 5 days of deliberately ordinary dates, and get to know you questions, and carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. What happened now? Okay, I said. I'll be home by 4. I'll get dinner. What do you want? Surprise me. I hung up and sat in my car, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine, watching teachers and students come and go from the building. This was my world. These people, this job, this life I'd built before Vanessa, before the lottery, before everything got complicated. Derek was right. I didn't want to lose this just because I'd come into money. But I also couldn't ignore that everything was different now. Fourth and fifth period passed in a blur. I was on autopilot, going through the motions I'd perfected over 5 years of teaching. My students noticed. Several asked if something was wrong, if I was sick, if I needed to sit down. I assured them I was fine, just distracted. They didn't need to know that their teacher had just become a multimillionaire. When the last bell rang, I gathered my papers and headed for my car. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Home in 20. Got Thai food from your place. Hope that's okay. I smiled, despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. She'd gone to my Thai place, the one I'd shown her on Wednesday, the one she'd never been to before last week. The traffic was light, and I made it home, to Vanessa's apartment, our apartment, whatever it was, in 15 minutes. She wasn't there yet, so I changed out of my work clothes and into jeans and a t-shirt. I splashed some water on my face, tried to calm the nervous energy buzzing through my body. When Vanessa arrived, she was carrying bags from the Thai restaurant and wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual work attire. Her hair was down, her face free of the power makeup she usually wore for the office. I left at 2:30, she said, putting the food on the counter. I told them I had a personal emergency. My assistant was floored. I think it's the first time I've ever left early in 3 years. Is everything okay at work? Everything's fine. I just didn't want to wait. I've been thinking about this conversation all day. She started unpacking the food. Mr. Chen asked about you. He said he hasn't seen you in a while. I told him you've been busy, but you miss his pad thai. You talked to Mr. Chen? He's very chatty. He told me how you used to come in 3 times a week. Always ordered the same thing. Always left a good tip, even though he knew you couldn't afford it. He said you were a good man. She looked at me. He's right, you know. You are a good man. We served the food and sat at the dining room table, the same table where we'd had our first real conversation 5 nights ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. So, Vanessa said, stirring her food with her fork. $8 million. $8.7 million, technically. Right. $8.7 million sitting in your personal checking account. David's setting up the trust this week, and then it'll move there. Protected. Properly structured. Protected from me, you mean? I met her gaze. Protected from everyone. It's what he recommended. She nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that. About the prenup. About the money. About what it means that you have all the power now. Vanessa, let me finish, please. She put her fork down, folded her hands on the table. When I wrote that prenup 4 years ago, I was thinking about protecting myself, about making sure that if our marriage failed, I wouldn't lose everything I'd worked for. I was thinking about my money, my assets, my future. I never once considered that you might end up in the same position, that you might have something worth protecting from me. The prenup protected us both. That was the point, was it? Or was it about protecting me and making you sign away your rights to anything I might ever gain? She shook her head. I've been rereading it, over and over these past few days. Really reading it. Not just the sections I wrote, but the whole thing. And Marcus, it's brutal. It basically says that everything I have is mine, and anything you acquire during our marriage is also yours. But the implication was always that you'd never acquire anything worth protecting, that I'd always be the one with assets to safeguard. That's not it is. Be honest. When you had me sign that prenup, did you ever, for 1 second, imagine a scenario where you'd be the wealthy one? Where you'd be the one using those protections against me? I thought back to sitting in that restaurant 4 years ago, signing away my hypothetical rights to her hypothetical future wealth. No, I admit it. I didn't. Neither did I. I never imagined I'd be on this side of the prenup, wanting access to money that legally belongs entirely to my spouse. And God, Marcus, it's humbling. It's humbling. I finally understand how you must have felt all these years, being the poor partner in a marriage where everything belonged to me. I never wanted your money. I know that. But you wanted to feel like an equal partner. You wanted our marriage to be a partnership, not a financial arrangement where I held all the cards. She reached a hand across the table. You hold all the cards now. You could divorce me tomorrow, and I'd get nothing. The prenup is ironclad. And I'm sitting here terrified that you're going to do just that. That you're going to realize you don't need me anymore, and you're going to walk away. Is that what you'd do if our positions were reversed? She was quiet for a long moment. For days ago, I would have said no. I would have insisted that I'd never leave you over money. But honestly, I don't know. I don't know what I'd do if I suddenly had $8 million and a spouse I barely connected with. I'd like to think I'd be generous, that I'd share, that I'd see it as an opportunity to strengthen our marriage. But maybe I'd protect myself. Maybe I'd do exactly what you're doing, setting up trusts and asset protection and legal fortresses to keep my spouse out. I'm not trying to keep you out, aren't you? You've consulted lawyers without telling me the details. You've made plans I'm not a part of. You're building structures that explicitly exclude me from your financial decisions. That's not a partnership, Marcus. That's what I did to you for 4 years, and now you're doing it to me. She wasn't wrong. For 5 days, I'd been operating independently, making decisions about my money, not consulting her, building walls to protect myself. I'd been doing exactly what she'd done to me, using the very prenup she'd insisted upon. What do you want me to do? I asked. Just hand you half of it? Ignore the prenup that you wrote? No, I don't want you to give me anything. She stopped, struggling for the words. I want us to figure this out together. As partners, not as two separate people with separate finances living separate lives. I want to know what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you want our future to look like. Our future, if we have one. If you still want one with me. I got up, walked to the window, looked out at the city lights. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa's quiet breathing. I could feel her waiting for an answer I wasn't sure I had. I don't know if I can do this, I said finally. Not the money, that's just logistics. But trusting you again. Believing that you want a real marriage and not just access to my bank account. How do I know this isn't all just an elaborate performance? That the moment I let you in, you won't go right back to being the woman who worked 80-hour weeks and barely acknowledged my existence? You don't. Her voice was thick with tears. You don't. I can't prove it to you, Marcus. I can promise and apologize and cry and beg, but none of that proves I've changed. The only way you'll know is if you take a chance. If you choose to believe in the possibility that we can be better than we were. I turned to face her. She was crying openly now, not trying to hide it or maintain her composure, just raw and vulnerable and terrified. And if I can't? I asked. What if the trust is just gone? Then we get a divorce. She said it simply, matter-of-factly. We sign the papers. We divide nothing because there's nothing to divide, and we go on with our separate lives. You'll be rich and single, and I'll be alone with my career and my money and my regrets. And we'll both wonder what might have been if we'd just been brave enough to try. And if I say I want to try, what then? Then we try. We go to therapy. We learn how to be partners instead of roommates. We figure out how to build a real marriage instead of a legal arrangement. She paused, wiped at her eyes. We use some of that money to quit our jobs for a while and spend real time together. We travel. We talk. We remember why we fell in love in the first place. You want me to fund our reconciliation with my lottery money? I want us to use the resources we have, resources you happen to have, to give our marriage a real shot. But if that makes you uncomfortable, if you'd rather keep every penny for yourself, I understand. The money is yours. You don't owe me anything. She got up, came to where I stood by the window. But Marcus, I'm asking you, begging you, not to let this money destroy what we could be. Don't let my mistakes and your hurt and this prenup kill the possibility of us. Because I love you. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, and I'm terrified I've realized it too late. I looked at her, at this complicated, brilliant, damaged woman who'd spent 4 years protecting herself from me and was now asking me to save her from herself. The woman who'd written an ironclad prenup that had accidentally protected me instead. The woman who'd finally showed up when it might be too late. I need more time, I said. She nodded, tears still tracking. Okay, but I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to think, to process, to figure out what I want. How much time? I don't know. A few more weeks maybe. Until the trust is finalized. Until I have some distance from all of this. Okay, she said again. I can wait. I'll wait as long as you need. She turned away from the window, started clearing the Thai food we'd barely touched. I watched her move around the kitchen, and I thought about Derek's advice. Don't let the money change who you are. But the money had already changed everything. The question was whether the change meant destruction or transformation. 3 weeks later, I was in David Brennan's office, signing the final trust documents. The money was no longer just sitting in my checking account. It was structured, protected, invested wisely according to a strategy one barely understood but trusted because David had explained it with patience and clarity. Congratulations, David said, sliding the completed paperwork into a folder embossed with the firm's logo. You are now the sole beneficiary of the Marcus James Reed Irrevocable Trust. The funds are protected from creditors, lawsuits, and, he paused meaningfully, divorce proceedings. Unless I choose otherwise, I said. Unless you choose otherwise, he confirmed. You have complete discretion over distributions. You can give money to anyone you choose, including your wife. But those gifts would be considered separate from marital property. She'd have no automatic claim. I nodded, taking the folder. 3 weeks ago, this would have felt like a victory. Now it just felt heavy. Can I ask you something? David said, leaning back in his chair. And this is off the clock, man to man. Sure. What are you going to do about your marriage? I still don't know. Vanessa's a good lawyer, one of the best I've ever worked with, in fact. But more importantly, and I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she's been a wreck these past few weeks. I've heard through mutual colleagues that she's been leaving work at a reasonable hour, turning down cases, taking actual lunch breaks. Whatever you two are working through, it's affecting her. Is that supposed to make me feel guilty? No. It's supposed to tell you that she's serious, that she's actually trying. Whether that matters to you is your call. I left his office and drove home through rush hour traffic, watching the city move around me. In 3 weeks, I developed routines I'd never had. I'd met with financial advisors who'd explained investment strategies and diversification. I'd looked at houses I could now afford, houses with yards and extra bedrooms and garages that could hold cars that didn't make worrying noises. I'd even test-driven a new car, though I hadn't bought one yet. But mostly, I'd watched Vanessa try. She'd kept her promise. She'd come home by 7 every night. She'd cooked dinner, sometimes successfully, often disastrously, always with effort. She'd asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. She'd suggested therapy, and we'd been going twice a week to a therapist named Dr. Miranda Chun, who had a gentle way of pointing out our patterns without making either of us feel attacked. You've built parallel lives, Dr. Chun had said in our first session. 2 people on separate tracks that occasionally intersect but never truly merge. The question is, do you want to merge those tracks, or are you more comfortable with the distance? That question had haunted me for 3 weeks. The apartment was warm and bright when I got home. Vanessa was in the kitchen wearing an apron, a real apron, something she'd bought specifically for these culinary experiments, standing over the stove with a look of intense concentration. Don't ask what I'm making, she said without turning around. It's supposed to be chicken piccata, but I think I've already ruined it. It smells good. You're lying, but I appreciate it. She glanced over her shoulder at me. How is it with David? It's done. The trust is finalized. She was quiet for a moment, stirring whatever was in the pan. So the money's completely protected now. Completely yours. Completely mine, I confirmed. Okay. Her voice was steady, controlled. That's good. You should protect yourself. I put down my briefcase. I walked into the kitchen, leaned against the counter where I could see her face. Vanessa, look at me. She put down the wooden spoon and turned. Her eyes were already shining with tears she was trying not to shed. I've made a decision, I said. Okay. She braced herself, her hands gripping the counter behind her. I'm quitting my job at the end of the school year. I'm not renewing my contract. Her eyes went wide. What are you? I'm going to write that novel I started in college. And probably a few others after that. Maybe they'll be terrible. Maybe no one will ever read them. But I want to try. I want to do something for myself that isn't safe or practical or expected. Marcus, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. And she looked genuinely happy, despite the tears. What else? I'm going to buy a house. Something with a yard and space for an office where I can write. Something that feels like mine. Like ours. If you want it to be. If I want it to be. I'm also buying a new car. And before you say anything, I'm keeping the Civic too. I don't care if it makes worrying noises. It's my car, and I've decided the worrying noises are part of its charm. She laughed, even as the tears were now running freely. What else? I'm going to start a foundation. I want to use some of the money to help students who want to go to college but can't afford it. Kids like me, who have potential but not privilege. I'm going to call it the Reed Education Foundation, and I want to endow it with $2 million. Marcus. And I want to give another $1 million to your pro bono fund at the firm, the one you never told me about, because you thought I wouldn't be interested. I want to help fund the work you do that you actually care about, not just the work that pays well. She was sobbing now, not even trying to hide it. Why? Why would you do that? Because it's the right thing to do. Because I can afford to. Because I've realized that having money means I have the ability to make choices that matter, to help people, to build something meaningful. I moved closer to her. And because I want to try at this marriage, for real, not just coasting along hoping things will get better. You do? I do. But Vanessa, I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean I'm just giving you half the money. The trust stays as it is. The prenup is still in effect. Legally, financially, the money is still mine. Her face fell slightly. But, I continued, I'm choosing to build a life with you. To share experiences, opportunities, and possibilities. The house will be in both of our names. The foundation will have both of us on the board. We'll make financial decisions together about how to use the resources we have. Resources I happen to control, but that affect us both. That's more than fair. It's more than I deserve. Maybe. But it's not about what you deserve. It's about what I want. And what I want is a real partnership. Not because a prenup says I have to, not because society expects it, but because I choose it. She closed the distance between us, wrapped her arms around me, buried her face in my chest. I love you so much. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you made the right decision. I hope so. Because Vanessa, I was serious before. I can't go back to the way things were. I can't be the patient husband who accepts scraps of your attention and pretends it's enough. If we're going to do this, we're doing it right. We will. I promise. She pulled back, looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I actually have something to tell you too, something I've been waiting to say until I knew where we stood. Okay, I'm making partner next month. The official announcement is in 2 weeks. It's what I've been working toward for years. Vanessa, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me? Because I've also decided to turn it down. I stared at her. What? I don't want to be a partner. I don't want to work 80-hour weeks for the rest of my life. I don't want to miss dinners and birthdays and anniversaries because some client has an emergency. I don't want to be my mother, achieving everything professionally and failing at everything personally. She took a shaky breath. So I'm staying on as senior associate. I'm going to focus on pro bono work, set boundaries with clients, and have a life outside the office. A life with you. Are you sure? You've wanted this forever. I wanted it because I thought it would make me happy, that the success would fill the void I've been trying to fill since I was a little girl watching my parents' cold marriage. But Marcus, being a partner, being present in my life, in our life, that's what will make me happy. I pulled her close again, and we stood there in the kitchen as whatever she was cooking began to burn. Neither of us moved to fix it. For once, we just existed in the moment, holding on to each other in the fragile hope that we might actually get it right. The chicken piccata is definitely ruined, Vanessa said finally, her voice muffled against my chest. That's okay. We'll order pizza. Cheap pizza from that place you like. The cheapest. She laughed, and it was the sound I'd fallen in love with. I have one more thing to say, and then I promise I'm done being dramatic. What? She pulled back, looked at me with complete seriousness. Thank you for drafting that prenup. For protecting my assets. For being so careful and thorough and forward-thinking. Because if you hadn't insisted on it 4 years ago, she trailed off, a smile breaking through. Wait, I wrote it. I insisted on it, and somehow it ended up protecting you instead of me. That's actually hilarious. It's ironic. It's karma. It's the universe telling me that what goes around comes around. That you reap what you sow, what? She was laughing now. Really laughing. I spent so much time and money crafting the perfect prenup to protect my assets, and it ended up being the thing that protected you from me. It's like a legal comedy. Or a tragedy, depending on how you look at it. No. She shook her head, still smiling. It's perfect. It's exactly what we needed. Because if the prenup hadn't been ironclad, if there'd been any ambiguity, we'd probably be in court right now fighting over your lottery money. Instead, it forced us to actually face our marriage, to figure out what we meant to each other beyond money and legal agreements and financial arrangements. She was right. The prenup, her prenup, the one she'd written to protect herself, had actually saved us. It had given me the power to walk away, which paradoxically made me want to stay. It had stripped away any illusion that money could be the foundation of our relationship. It had forced us both to ask the essential question, what are we really together for? And somehow, impossibly, we'd found an answer worth fighting for. Let's order that pizza, I said. And then let's talk about houses and what we want our future to look like, and building something together that isn't based on protection or fear or separate bank accounts. Together, she repeated, trying the word out. I like the sound of that. We ordered pizza, cheap, greasy, perfect pizza from the place near my old apartment. We spread house listings out on the dining room table and argued about granite versus marble countertops, about whether we needed a pool, about how many bedrooms made sense. We talked about the foundation, about what criteria we'd use to select scholarship recipients, about the legacy we wanted to build. And when we finally went to bed that night, Vanessa's head on my chest and my arms around her. I thought about my father taking us to the beach when he couldn't afford it. Sometimes the best things in life require risk. They require choosing love over self-protection. They require believing that something beautiful can grow from honest soil, even when all the practical voices are telling you to